Hey everyone, it's Tobes, and welcome to your second monitor. Today is the first video in my series of Avatar: The Last Airbender Commander deck techs. The Avatar set has an enormous number of legendary creatures, so I wanted to showcase some of my favorite commander options from among them. I'm releasing a new Avatar Commander deck every Thursday through mid-January when the Lorwyn set drops, in addition to my usual Monday Commander deck tech videos. So if you have a request for a specific Avatar Commander you'd like to see me build, or a way you want to see me build them, let me know in the comments below. As you see, today our commander is Aang Swift Savior, but we're doing something a little different in this video. The Avatar set is bringing new players into Magic, and you, dear viewer, might just be one of those new players. If not, I bet you have friends who love Avatar and who might also love Magic if they give it a try. So I've built two versions of this deck. The first is for new players who love the world of Avatar as much as I do. Whether you've just learned to play with the Avatar Beginner Box or Avatar Jumpstart, or maybe you played in the pre-release and you have a stack of Avatar cards sitting on your shelf, this version of the deck, the first version, is meant to flavorfully explore the source material. It loosely follows the story of the first season of the show, highlighting characters and moments from the beginning of Aang's journey to his victory over the Fire Nation fleet in the Siege of the North. It is fun and playable without being too complex or competitive. For experienced players, it's a Bracket 1 deck. Where appropriate, I've prioritized affordability over efficacy, including in the land base. One can assemble this deck relatively cheaply and have a starting point for upgrading it as they become more comfortable with Commander play. The second version of the deck is more in keeping with the kind of decks that I typically build for this channel. It's comparable to a precon and includes a stronger land base and more broadly applicable synergistic cards that can be reused in other decks. As of this recording, it includes only one card over $10, another version of Aang, and it retains a lot of the DNA of the first deck, including 22 non-basic cards from the Avatar sets. My intention is for it to feel increasingly fun and exciting as players with the first deck upgrade their way into the second one, stopping at whatever point they want or even going beyond what I've put together. Just a little more preamble and we'll get to the decks. This video is coming in two parts. The first is a simple overview for the Bracket 1 version of the deck. I won't go into quite as much detail in this section as I usually do, but I'll cover how each card works and what it does for us when we play it. If you're a beginner, or you're putting this deck together for a beginner in your life, feel free to use just this portion of the video as a primer. You can jump right to it in the video's bookmarks below. The second part of the video is a full deck tech for the upgraded version of the deck. I won't retread too much ground, but I want it to be accessible for players who have played the first version, so I approach things a little more strategically, and I'm clear about why it's an upgrade. I usually present my Universes Beyond decks in this fashion, so if you're an established player who wants to see how I built Aang at the end of Book 1, feel free to skip ahead to that section. So we're going to start Part 1 right now. That covers it. Thanks in advance for watching, like and subscribe if you're so inclined, and let us at last talk about our commander. Aang, Swift Savior, is a 2/3 legendary human avatar ally for 1, a white, and a blue. Aang has Flash, so we can play him anytime we could cast an instant. He has Flying, so he can only be blocked by creatures that also have Flying or that have Reach. And when Aang enters, we Airbend up to one other target creature or spell, which means we exile it, put it in the exile zone, and while it's exiled, its owner may cast it for just 2 generic mana rather than its mana cost. Because we can target a creature with it, that means we can get creatures off the battlefield. But we can also target a spell with it, which means any spell that's on the stack currently. Once it resolves, it will either go to the graveyard if it was an instant or sorcery, or it will go into play because it's a permanent spell. Once it's a permanent and it's on the battlefield, unless it's a creature, Aang can't airbend it. But of course, if it is a creature, Aang can. But while it's on the stack, we can flash Aang in and airbend that spell, which means it goes to the opponent, to the controlling player's exile, and they're going to have to pay that to 2 generic mana in order to cast it again. Aang also has one more ability, which is we can Waterbend 8 generic mana to transform Aang. Waterbend means we can pay 8 generic mana, but we can also tap creatures and artifacts, each of which pays 1 generic toward that 8. If we do that, we transform Aang, which means we flip him over, and we have Aang and La Ocean's Fury, which is a legendary Avatar Spirit ally. It's a 5/5, it has Reach and Trample, and it says whenever it attacks, we put a 1/1 counter, a +1/+1 counter that is, on each tapped creature we control. So if, for example, we used 8 creatures to Waterbend Aang, they're all tapped as part of paying for the Waterbending cost. Aang flips over, and assuming Aang doesn't have summoning sickness, we can attack right away and put a 1/1 counter on each of those creatures. It's also true that if Aang and Law Ocean's Fury attacks alongside a bunch of our other creatures, we get to put 1/1 counters on all of those creatures that are tapped from the attack. In addition, it doesn't say each other tapped creature we control. So when Aang and Law attacks, we're going to be putting a counter on it as well, assuming we don't have Vigilance somehow. So a pretty fun commander, I think. Lots going on here. This, of course, is Aang during the Seas of the North. So Aang is an airbender, primarily. He's got flash because he's quick, he's got flying because he can airbend, and he comes right in and airbends something. And if we want to have him waterbend, we can have him turn into something much stronger and combine with the Ocean Spirit. So this is our commander, and this is what we've built ourselves around. I'm going to go through all the other cards in this deck, which I have tagged in this Moxfield list. You'll be able to find the link to this list in the video's description. Of course, at the bottom of that list, there's a considering section with a few cards you might want to look into considering yourself for this deck, but really the considering list for this deck is the other deck list. So I just want to describe the fact that I use tags to categorize the cards in this deck, and I use them to describe what each card does for the deck, not really what the card itself does. For example, we're going to start by looking at our airbending section. And in this section, this version of Aang has flying, but I have not tagged Aang as an evasive card, because while Aang is himself evasive, he doesn't give evasion to anything else. As opposed to Appa over here, who has flying, and when Appa enters or attacks, we can choose to give another creature flying. Appa gives that creature flying, so Appa is tagged evasively. It's what the cards do for the deck, not what they do sort of in a vacuum. So let's first talk about these cards with airbending. We have a different version of Aang. It's Aang the Last Airbender. Gotta put this in the deck. It's the name of the show. For 3 and a white, we get a 3/2 legendary human avatar ally with flying that says when Aang enters, we airbend up to one other target non-land permanent. So as opposed to our commander, this can hit artifacts, it can hit enchantments, it can hit any permanent that isn't a land, but it can't hit spells, which is fine because this Aang doesn't have flash, so it wouldn't be able to respond to something on the stack anyway. In addition, whenever we cast a lesson spell, Aang will gain lifelink until end of turn. Now, it says Aang here. Whenever a card in Magic refers to itself by name, it's only referring to this card. It doesn't mean that this card gives our commander, which is a different version of Aang, lifelink whenever we cast a lesson. It's just referring to itself. That's just a convention in Magic. Cards only refer to other cards if they say a card named blank or a permanent named blank. If it just says the name of the card and it happens to be the same name as the card that the text is on, it's only referring to itself. So this is a pretty nice card. For 4 mana, we get a 3/2 flyer. That's pretty good. It's going to airbend something, which we can use on our opponent's creatures or other permanents to get them out of the way, at least until our opponent's able to recast it for that 2 generic mana. And whenever we cast a lesson, this Aang will get lifelink until end of turn. Lifelink is very nice. If you want to know what lessons are a type of instant and sorcery that have the lesson tag. We are running 2 sorceries, both of which are lessons, and 9 instants, 6 of which are lessons. So there's 8 cards in our deck that are going to give this version of Aang lifelink. But even without, it's a 3/2 flyer for 4 mana that airbends something when it comes in. Pretty alright. Next, we have one of those lessons. It's Airbender's Reversal. You can see it says lesson right beside instant. For 1 and a white, we have the ability to choose to either destroy a target attacking creature or airbend a creature that we control. So this is a removal spell. It gets rid of one of our opponent's creatures as long as that creature is attacking. Or we can have it airbend one of our creatures, which can protect our creature. Maybe our opponent's attacking with something big, we block with, let's say, Aang the Last Airbender, and before combat damage, we use Airbender's Reversal to airbend our own Aang, meaning their creature, assuming it doesn't have trample, is blocked already, and it doesn't do any damage to us. And then after that is over, on our next turn, we can just replay this Aang. He will enter again, we can airbend a non-land permanent. We get to do it all over again. Or we can just use Airbender's Reversal to kill something that is attacking us. Pretty good flexibility there. Next, we have Airbending Lesson with Aang and Monkiatsu. 2 and a white for an instant, also a lesson, that says Airbend to target non-land permanent. So another great way for us to shut down an attacking creature or a problematic permanent of some other sort. It doesn't say that we don't control or that we do control, so we can hit our own stuff with this or our opponent's. And once we do that, we also draw a card. So 3 mana to get something either into our exile zone so that we can rebuy it, or into an opponent's exile zone, and hopefully they don't have enough mana to recast it again right away, and we get to replace Airbending Lesson in our hand by drawing a card. Next up, we have one of the Appas. It's Appa Loyal Sky Bison. 4 and double white for a 4/4 legendary bison ally with flying. Whenever it enters or attacks, which means we're going to get this trigger when it comes in and when Appa attacks, we either give a creature that we control flying until end of turn, or we airbend another non-land permanent that we control. So we get to rebuy some of our triggers if we want. This is only a permanent we control, but this Aang can hit any non-land permanent. So we might attack with Appa, airbend Aang, and then post-combat we play Aang and airbend something else. So you can chain these things out. It's pretty fun. Next, of course, we have to have Aang's glider staff, and what a happy smile. For 2 and a white, we have an equipment, which means this is an artifact that comes in, and it has an equip ability. If we pay 2 generic mana, we can attach this to one of our creatures, and it will stay attached until we attach it to a different creature, or until the creature that it's attached to leaves the battlefield for some reason. If it does, though, we get to keep the staff. It just falls off that creature. So what it does is it gives that creature +1/+1 and flying, but also whenever the equipment enters, we get to airbend up to 1 target creature. So it could be one of ours, it could be an opponent's. It's just a nice little bonus airbend on top of a 3 mana equip for 2 +1/+1 and flying equipment. Pretty all right. Finally, a blue card. It's Whirlwind Technique. 4 and double blue for an instant. It's another lesson that says target player draws 2 cards, then discards a card. We should probably target ourselves with this, meaning we're going to be putting 2 more cards in our hand, and then whichever the card is in our hand that we like the least, we'll just discard that. It gives us a little bit of selection and also a little card advantage. In addition, we get to airbend up to 2 target creatures. They don't have to be our creatures, and since this is an instant, we can throw this out on an opponent's turn and airbend, let's say, 2 creatures that were attacking us. Now they're in exile and they certainly aren't attacking anymore, plus we got to draw 2 and discard 1. Pretty nice. So that covers our airbending section. We're going to go to the waterbending section next and take a look at these waterbending cards, if I can find them. Oh, of course, because we have waterbending in the names of the cards. So we've got 16 cards tagged with waterbending. These are either cards that allow us to waterbend, which of course is the whole point of the first season, Aang learning to waterbend, or cards that help us when we waterbend. For example, Compassionate Healer. 1 and a white gives us a 2/2 human cleric ally that says whenever this creature becomes tapped, we gain a life and we scry 1. So scry, as we look at the top card of our library, we can either put it back on top of the library or we can put it on the bottom of our library. Compassionate Healer doesn't let us waterbend, but because waterbending allows us to tap artifacts and creatures we control to pay for part or all of the cost of the waterbending ability, Compassionate Healer is a great card for us to use for that. Because if we waterbend, we can tap the Compassionate Healer and thereby trigger its ability. When it becomes tapped, as part of us paying for that waterbending cost, we'll gain a life and we'll scry 1. When we do that, this ability, the gain a life and scry 1, will trigger and resolve before whatever we've paid for the waterbending ability resolves, at least in normal circumstances. For example, we have Geyser Leaper here. Geyser Leaper is 4 and a blue for a 4/3 flying human warrior ally with waterbend 4. So if we were going to pay this waterbending cost using our Compassionate Healer, this is going to trigger as part of us paying for this. It will put this ability for Geyser Leaper on the stack, the ability that lets us draw a card and then discard a card, but the Compassionate Healer's ability will resolve first, since this is part of being tapped. That's just how the stack works. And it's pretty nice because the Compassionate Healer lets us scry, and then the Geyser Leaper lets us draw and discard. So if we know that the card we have on top isn't what we want to draw, well, we just scry it to the bottom, and then we resolve this. So yeah. Next we have North Pole Patrol. North Pole Patrol is 2 and a blue for a 2/3 human soldier ally that taps to untap another target permanent we control. Now, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to tap this and untap something else? Well, maybe the something else you have is really big. Maybe it's Appa. Maybe Appa is a better blocker than this 2/3 Pole Patrol. So our opponents attack us thinking that the only thing we can block with is this 2/3, and instead we tap this to untap Appa and then block with that. Maybe that's more advantageous to us. In addition, we can untap, it doesn't say a non-land permanent, so we can untap our lands with this. Meaning we'd be able to tap one of our, let's say, islands for blue mana, tap the patrol to untap the island, and then tap the island for another blue mana. So we've ramped ourselves a little bit. We've gotten a little bit more mana than we had access to with the number of lands we have. Pretty good. Lots of different uses for this. In addition, we can also Waterbend 3 and tap the patrol to tap a creature an opponent controls. That's a nice form of evasion. We make it so that an opponent's creature that could block us doesn't get to. Or maybe they have an ability that they have to tap their creature for. If we use this Waterbend ability to tap that creature before they can, they either have to use that ability right away, if they're even allowed to, or lose the chance to use that ability this turn because the creature's already tapped. North Pole Patrol is very flexible in those ways. Next we have a Waterbending lesson, just Aang and Katara working together. For 3 and a blue, we get a sorcery, which is a lesson, relevant, that lets us draw 3 cards, and then we discard a card unless we Waterbend 2. So in a way, this is us paying 5 and a blue to draw 3, because it's 3 and a blue, and then Waterbend 2, or discard a card. So yeah, nice to look at it as draw 3 and discard 1 for 4, or draw 3 and just keep all 3, as long as we pay 3 and a blue and either 2 more mana, tap 2 creatures, tap 2 artifacts, tap 1 of each, pay a mana and tap an artifact or a creature, either way. So pretty nice flexibility for us here, especially since our deck is so full of creatures and we have several different artifacts as well that we can use for this. That's something I guess I should mention right now. If we look back at our airbending section, we have this glider staff here. Glider staff is an equipment that we can attach to another creature, or to a creature rather. And when we do that, if we attack with a creature, it taps that creature, but it doesn't tap the staff, which means that staff is still available for us to tap if we want to pay for waterbending. We don't have to, the glider staff will not change what it does depending on whether or not it's tapped or untapped. It doesn't really care about whether or not it's tapped or untapped. We can still equip it when it's tapped. It still gives +1/+1 and flying while it's tapped. So this is just going to sit on the battlefield, helping out one of our creatures that we've attached it to, and existing so that we can use it for our waterbending. All of our artifacts are pretty similar to that in this way. So next up is Water Tribe Rallier. 1 and a white for a 2/2 human soldier ally. That says, it just has 1 ability, Waterbend for 5. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card with power 3 or less from among them, put it into your hand, put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So this gives us the ability to tap our creatures and or artifacts, plus pay mana, to look at the top 4 and essentially draw a creature. We're probably going to get hit a creature. Most of our creatures have power 3 or less. So this may whiff sometimes. We may look at the top 4 and not have anything that we can put into our hand, so they all have to go on the bottom in a random order. But this is a nice ability for us to use during our opponent's end step, because it doesn't say anywhere activate only as a sorcery. By default, in Magic, every ability is able to be activated at instant speed unless it says otherwise. So we can save up our mana or have creatures that are untapped. Maybe we plan to block with them, maybe we do or we don't, but right before our turn, as long as we're able to pay the waterbending cost of 5, we can activate this ability. Maybe we can pay the waterbending cost of 5 twice. We can activate it 2 times. Pretty nice. Repeatable value. Next we have Watery Grasp. For a single blue, we have an aura that enchants a creature. So we attach this to a creature the same way we would attach that equipment, except that Watery Grasp targets that creature and enters the battlefield attached to it. We don't have to pay an equip cost or anything. It says enchanted creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. That means this is an aura we want to put on one of our opponent's creatures. It doesn't tap the creature on its own, but if that creature was already tapped, when we put Watery Grasp on it, it's just not going to untap during its controller's untap step. In addition, while Watery Grasp is attached to a creature, we can Waterbend 5, and that enchanted creature's owner will shuffle it into their library. What that will mean is we've gotten rid of that creature basically until they draw it again, which they may never do. When that happens, Watery Grasp will not shuffle into their deck, it will go to our graveyard, because it won't be attached to anything anymore. But a pretty nice way for us to pay 1 to lock something down for as long as we want to, and if we really need to get rid of it, we can just Waterbend 5, and it's gone for good. Probably. Next up, it wouldn't be Book 1 without Grand Grand. A single blue gets us a 1/2 legendary human peasant ally that says whenever Grand Grand becomes tapped, we draw a card and then discard a card. So again, this is a creature that we want to Waterbend with, because we're able to tap Grand Grand to pay for waterbending costs, and that will let us draw and discard, which we call looting in Magic. It means we have the same number of cards in hand as when we started, but we have a better selection, and we just take whichever card we like least and put it in the graveyard. Pretty nice. In addition, non-creature spells we cast cost 1 generic mana less to cast, as long as there are 3 or more lesson cards in our graveyard. This may not come up. In a commander deck, we only have, 8? Yes, 8 lessons in the deck. So the chance that we're going to get 3 of those into our graveyard, not very high, but it might come up. And then all of our spells, as long as they aren't creatures, cost 1 less to cast. Thanks, Grand Grand. Next we have Katara Bending Prodigy. 2 and a blue gives us a 2/3 legendary human warrior ally that says at the beginning of your end step, if Katara is tapped, put a +1/+1 counter on her. So Katara is going to keep getting bigger as long as she's tapped in our end step, either because we attacked with her or because we used her to waterbend. And she has Waterbend 6, draw a card. We can tap Katara to pay for her own waterbending ability. Usually a pretty good idea. It does want us to do that during our turn, because that will let us trigger her in-step trigger. But if we do that, she's just going to keep getting bigger and bigger, and eventually she's going to be big enough that we can use her as a blocker, as a good attacker. She'll just get better for us. Next we have Air Nomad Student. A little bit of Aang's history here. 3 and a white for a 2/2 human monk with flying that says at the beginning of your end step, if this creature didn't attack this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So it's a 2/2 flyer, it's great for us to block with, but we can also use it to waterbend, because we don't want to attack with it, and if we're not attacking with it, how else are we going to tap it? By using it to pay for waterbending costs. Next, we have Aang's Iceberg. It's just episode 1. 2 and a white for an enchantment with flash, so we can play this on an opponent's turn if we want to. When this enchantment enters, exile up to 1 other target non-land permanent until this enchantment leaves the battlefield. So this is Banishing Light, or Oblivion Ring, if you want to think of it that way. There's other cards in Magic that work this way. It just means that we take whichever non-land permanent we want to exile, and we kind of tuck it under this card. And when Aang's Iceberg leaves the battlefield, we get to, or whoever owned that permanent is going to get the card back, and it will re-enter for them. So this is a removal spell, as long as we have the Iceberg in play. However, we can also Waterbend 3, and if we do, we sacrifice the Iceberg and we scry 2. So the reason that is helpful to us, for a number of reasons, but in Commander, if your commander leaves the battlefield, you can have it go to the command zone again, rather than go to the zone it was going to go to. Like if it dies, it should go to the graveyard, and then when it does, you can choose to put it in the command zone. If you were to somehow shuffle it into your deck, instead of that, you can put it in the command zone. If it were to go to exile, once it does, its controller can choose to put it in the command zone. So we might play Aang's Iceberg, exile our opponent's commander, and then they might choose to put it in the command zone, so it's not under the Iceberg anymore. So what do we do with this Iceberg? Well, we have the ability to sacrifice it by Waterbending 3 in order to scry 2. We just sort of crack it like an egg, and we get a little value out of it, even though the thing that was under it isn't under it anymore. It is also possible, I suppose, that we could target one of our own non-land permanents with this. It will be in exile under this as long as the Iceberg is in play, but we can then Waterbend and sack the Iceberg to have whatever we had under it come back. And when we do that, we'll also scry 2. So a little bit of a sort of similar to Airbending thing. It's not a terrific use for it, but it's an option. Sometimes it will come up. And since you can do it at flash speed, you might be able to trick your opponent, or rather surprise your opponent, by doing it that way. Next, we have Yue the Moon Spirit. 3 and a blue for a 3/3 legendary spirit ally with flying and vigilance. So 4 mana for a 3/3 flyer with vigilance, pretty good. And if we waterbend 5 and tap Yue, we can cast a non-creature spell from our hand without paying its mana cost. That's pretty great. We don't have a lot of cards in our deck that cost more than 5, but Yue can let us just spit something out without having to pay any mana for it at all. Because remember, we can waterbend without tapping it for mana. We can just tap creatures and or artifacts to do so. So this will let us get things out without us having to pay the mana for them. And if we just have the mana for it, or just a little bit of the mana for it, we can also pump that in here too. In addition, it's 5 generic mana. So let's say we had a card in our hand that is white, we only have blue lands in play. Well, we can pump 5 white mana into this to pay for the generic cost, tap Yue, and we're able to play that spell, or 5 blue mana into it rather, and we can play the white spell, as long as it's not a creature. Next we have the Unagi of Kyoshi Island. 3 and double blue for a 5/5 legendary serpent with flash, because it surprises you. It has Ward Waterbend 4, which means when someone targets the Unagi with anything, as long as they are not us, if they target the Unagi with a spell or an ability, we will counter that spell or ability unless they can pay the ward cost. That's how ward works. When it's targeted by a spell or ability an opponent controls, they must pay the ward cost with a trigger, or that spell or ability is countered. So that means they will have to either pay with creatures, lands, or artifacts with this waterbending cost. In addition, whenever an opponent draws their second card each turn, we draw 2 cards. So this is a very powerful effect. Everyone draws a card during their draw step, unless something crazy is going on, but oftentimes people are drawing other cards. We've already seen a couple of our cards that do that. If the Unagi is in play for us, and one of our opponents draws a second card on their turn, we'll just draw 2 of our own. Pretty sweet. Next up is another Katara. This is Water Tribe's Hope. 2, a white and double blue, gives us a 3/3 legendary human warrior ally. Katara has vigilance in this iteration. When she enters, again this is just this Katara, we will make a 1/1 ally creature token, so she comes with a friend. And if we waterbend X, which means we can choose whatever we want X to be, and then pay for it, that means that creatures we control will have base power and toughness XX until end of turn, and X can't be 0, and we can only do this during our turn. But still, if we have, 4 or 5 mana available, and 3 or 4 artifacts in play, then we can tap all of that, and maybe all of our creatures become 7/7 creatures until the end of turn. It can only happen during our turn, but it doesn't say at sorcery speed. So we might attack with several of our creatures, our opponents choose to block, and in response, we activate Katara's waterbending ability and make all of our creatures that are attacking, in addition to all of our other creatures, very large. And now suddenly, combat's going great for us. I like Katara. Next up, we have Tuyin La, Moon, and Ocean. This is a legendary fish spirit, 3 and a blue for a 3/3 that says whenever it becomes tapped, we draw a card, and whenever it becomes untapped, we put a +1/+1 counter on it. So we want to use this to waterbend as much as we can. We want to waterbend with this, or attack with it, or something every turn, because every time we tap it, we draw a card. Drawing cards is the best thing to do in Magic. Having more options means you're more powerful, it means you're going to be able to get a lot more done. And every time we tap it, we just have to wait till our untap step, and then it will untap, and we'll put a counter on it. It's just going to get bigger and stronger every time. Hard to overstate how good this card is. Next, we have Waterbender Ascension. 1 and a blue gives us an enchantment that says whenever a creature we control deals combat damage to a player, we put a quest counter on this enchantment. Then if it has 4 or more quest counters on it, we draw a card. So first of all, combat damage means damage that is dealt as part of the combat damage step during combat. So if you attack with a creature and then it's not blocked, the damage that it does to a player is combat damage. All other damage in Magic is called non-combat damage. It's relevant. This wants us to attack. And then a quest counter doesn't have an inherent meaning. It's just used by Waterbender Ascension to track how well it's doing. The way it tracks it is because whenever we do that combat damage to a player, we'll put a counter on this, and if at that point it has 4 or more quest counters, we draw a card. If we attack with 3 creatures, or rather if we attack with 4 creatures, let's say, and Waterbender Ascension has none, each creature is going to trigger this. So it's going to put 1 counter, 2 counters, 3 counters, and then the 4th counter will also draw us a card. At that point, if we attack with 4 creatures again and they all do combat damage to a player, we'll draw a card for each of them because it will already have 4 counters or more on it. In addition, Waterbender Ascension lets us waterbend 4 and give target creature we control the ability not to be blocked this turn. They're unblockable. So they can still be removed in other ways, but if we attack with them, our opponent can't declare blockers against them, which ensures we're going to hit, put a counter on the Ascension, and hopefully draw a card. Pretty sweet. That is real evasion. Next we have Waterbender's Restoration. Double blue for an instant, it's a lesson, that says as an additional cost to cast it, we can waterbend X. We don't have to, but we can. And we exile X target creatures we control and return those creatures to the battlefield under their owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. We call this a slow flicker. It means those creatures leave play, they go into exile, and then at the next end step, they come back. And whatever enters triggers they have will go off again. So if we don't waterbend X, we will have X equals 0. So this won't happen. This will just be a cool way for us to pay 2 blue and put Waterbender's Restoration into our graveyard. But what's nice about it is Waterbend, like I've been saying, you don't have to spend mana on. You can just tap creatures and or artifacts. And if you tap creatures for it, you can have those same creatures be the ones that you target. So tap some creatures, they will exile, and then they'll come back at the end step, the next end step, untapped. Pretty sweet. A really nice way to do something like, our opponent attacks with 5 creatures, we cast Waterbender's Restoration. As part of it, we waterbend 5, tapping the 5 creatures that we blocked their 5 creatures with. We do this after the blocker step. And then our creatures have already blocked their attackers, so those attackers will not do any damage to us unless they have trample. Our creatures will be exiled, and then at the next end step, which of course is our opponent's end step, since they're the one attacking, we'll get our creatures back, and they're all untapped again. Pretty nice. So that covers our waterbending section of this deck. So at this point, I want to talk about how I build decks. So I've explained already that I tag these things, and I talk about what they're doing in the deck, but why am I doing that? Well, the reason is because we have a deck template. This tells me how to build decks. It shows me what I want to try and do with the deck, and also how I can support that play pattern. So I take my commander, and I build around them as much as I can. A little bit different in this deck because we're trying to build a very flavorful deck and try to tell the story of book 1. But generally, I take my commander and I put 30 of my cards toward what my commander wants me to do. That's how we will know what we're doing at the table and how we're going to try and win generally. 30 more cards go towards supporting that game plan in the form of card advantage spells, which means getting more cards into our hand and giving more ability to cast spells. Acceleration spells, which lets us play out spells faster than just the normal 1 land per turn rhythm would let us. And interactive spells, things that will let us mess with our opponent's permanents or spells to stop them from what they're doing so that we have more space to do what we're doing. I usually run 1 or 2 what are called wraths or board wipes or sweepers, ways that can kill every creature on the battlefield or maybe every permanent on the battlefield, whatever it may be. Sometimes I do more, sometimes I do none. This deck doesn't have any, just to make it simple. But I almost always have a floor of 38 lands, which some players will say is quite high, other players will say is not high enough. It's kind of a sweet spot for me. If you run this many lands, generally you're going to always be able to hit your land drops and be able to cast your spells. So this is the game plan we're going for. So far, I've shown you a bunch of cards that airbend and that waterbend. This game plan in this deck is really more about showing off book 1 and all the cards that I could find that would fit into it that will work with Aang. So we're going to talk now, because even in a flavorful deck, you need to eat your vegetables. So we're going to talk about the support categories, starting with card advantage. I've used the word draw here just as a shorthand for card advantage. We have a lot of cards that give us some kind of advantage. So even though normally you'd be running 10 of these, I have a lot of overlap in these cards with other areas of play. So we're going to talk about these first. Aang's Defense is a single white for an instant. It's not a lesson. That says target blocking creature we control gets +2/+2 until end of turn, and we draw a card. This is in the deck because this is showing Aang fighting Zuko. Pretty nice. And from the flavor text, it seems like it's him fighting Zuko during their first encounter, but it doesn't really look like it in the art. In any case, if we block, and it looks like maybe our blocker is going to die, we cast Aang's Defense, make our blocker bigger, we eat their attacker, and we draw a card. Pretty nice. Aang's Journey is next. This is a colorless spell, and it is a lesson. It's a sorcery that costs 2 generic mana, and it has Kicker for 2 generic mana, which means we can pay an additional 2 generic when we cast it. So we can either cast it for 2 or for 4. It lets us search our library for a basic land card, and if it was kicked, we can instead search our library for a basic land card and a shrine card. A shrine is a type of enchantment. We have 2 shrines in this deck. One is white and one is blue. Those are our colors. Anyway, we reveal whichever cards we've searched for, put them in our hand, we shuffle, and we gain 2 life. So Aang's Journey, if we pay 2, it puts a card in our hand. That's card advantage, even if it's just a basic land. If we pay 4, it's going to put a basic land and one of the shrines that we have in our library, assuming we still have it in our library, and we haven't already drawn it or played it or put it in our graveyard somehow. We've seen Airbending lesson already. It lets us draw a card as part of Airbending permanent. Air Nomad Legacy is next, from an episode that I have mixed feelings about. I hate the defacing of the Northern Air Temple, but it does show how these people were inspired to build gliders and to fly themselves. It's really sort of special. Anyway, 1 white and 1 blue for an enchantment that says when it enters, we create a clue token. Clues are artifact tokens that have the ability innately for us to pay 2 and sacrifice it and draw a card. So this makes a clue, which lets us draw a card if we sacrifice it. We can, however, have that clue just sit on the battlefield and tap it as part of paying for waterbending, so it's good both ways. In addition, it gives all of the creatures we control with flying +1/+1. Doesn't help any of our non-flyers, but we have a few ways to jump our non-flyers, like Appa can give things flying. In addition, this definitely helps our commander because Aang flies on his own. Next, we have Fire Nation Warship, which I included so I could show off what vehicles work like, and because obviously they show up in the first 2 episodes, so we want to see that the Fire Nation is here. Can't really feature Zuko in a white and blue deck, but we can have a little nod to him this way. For 3 generic mana, we have an artifact vehicle. A vehicle is a regular artifact, but it has the crew ability, which means we can tap any number of creatures with a total power of 2 or more, and this artifact will become an artifact creature until end of turn. When it does, it is a 4/4 artifact creature, and it has reach. So pretty nice. Something worth noting about crew is that you can also do this at instant speed. So if our opponents attack us on their turn with a 3/3 flyer, as long as we've got at least 2 power worth of creatures untapped for us, we can activate this crew ability, tapping those creatures, and we have a 4/4 reach vehicle, which is now an artifact creature, so we can block their 3/3 flyer with it. Also, it says when it dies, we create a clue token. So very nice that this warship, if we're not planning to crew it, we can just use it to waterbend. We could tap it as an artifact, and when it dies, we can make a clue with it, which we can either draw a card off of or use to waterbend. Next, we have Forecasting Fortune Teller, a great episode. 1 and a blue for a 1/3 human advisor ally that says when it enters, we make a clue. Pretty good. It's just a 1/3 for 2, but we get a clue off of it, which helps us waterbend and also can help us draw cards. We've already seen Geyser Leaper, how it has the ability to let us waterbend for 4 and draw a card and discard a card. This is not actually card advantage because we're not ending up with more cards in hand than we started with, but it is card selection, so it's worth putting in this section just to keep it in mind. Next, we have our Sokka for the deck. Sokka Lateral Strategist is 1 and 2 hybrid mana. This is a hybrid Azorius mana, we call it. So you can cast this Sokka for a generic mana, and then either 2 white, 2 blue, or a white and a blue, however you want to do it. When he comes in, Sokka is a 2/4 legendary human warrior ally with vigilance that says when Sokka and at least 1 other creature attack, we draw a card. So Sokka can attack on his own, and when he does, pretty nice because he has vigilance, he won't tap. But we don't get to draw cards unless he's also got a friend with him. This is Sokka pretty early on. We need a team for Sokka. Next up, we have Teo, Spirited Glider. Teo is a 1/4 legendary human pilot ally for 3 and a blue. He can fly, and it says whenever one or more creatures we control with flying attack, we draw a card, then we discard a card, and if the card we discarded was not a land, we put a 1/1 counter on one of our creatures. So this is a little bit like the Connive mechanic, which we won't see anywhere else in this deck, but it's pretty sweet. All we have to do is attack with any number of creatures that fly, and it doesn't matter how many we attacked with, we will draw and discard, which again, not card advantage, but it is selection and it can help us. And if the card we discarded was not a land, we get to put a 1/1 counter on any creature we control. It doesn't even have to be one of the ones that flies or one of the ones we attacked with. So Teo can give us a little bit more power and the card selection in the process. Next is one of our shrines. This is the Spirit Oasis. 2 and a blue for a legendary enchantment, it's a shrine. And it says when it enters, we draw a card for each shrine we control. Again, there's only 2 shrines in this deck, so when it enters, we'll draw a card for it because we do control it. And whenever another shrine we control enters, we draw a card. So that means if we play the Spirit Oasis first, and then we get the white shrine, we will draw a card when the Oasis comes in and when the white shrine comes in. If the white shrine's already on the battlefield, however, Spirit Oasis will enter and we'll draw 2 cards because that will be 2 shrines that we control. So either way, we're getting 2 cards out of this, assuming we get both shrines into play. Doesn't matter which order they come in. I included this not because it's terrific for the deck, but because it's an important part of the story, and that's what we're doing here with our Bracket 1 flavor deck. We've already seen Waterbending Lesson. It lets us draw 3 cards and maybe discard if we don't want to waterbend 2. But we also have this Waterbending Scroll that we stole from those pirates. 1 and a blue for an artifact that says pay 6 mana and tap it to draw a card, but it costs 1 less for each island we control. So we have plenty of islands in this deck. We have, I think, 10 of them, maybe 10 or so. So the idea of having, 3 islands in play and this costing 3 is still pretty good. Just repeatable card advantage that we can use at instant speed. Next up, we've seen the Water Tribe Rallier. It doesn't draw us a card, but it does let us look at the top 4, and if we see a creature with power 3 or less in that 4, we can put it in our hand. That's just a card into our hand. Sounds like drawing to me. Gran, again, lets us draw and discard. Not card advantage, but it does give us a little selection whenever she becomes tapped. We've seen Katara Bending Prodigy, and she lets us Waterbend 6 to just draw a card. We're also running Mind Stone. This is a classic Magic card. Not every card in the deck can be an Avatar card. Some of them have to be supportive in other ways. Mind Stone is great. It is 2 generic mana for an artifact that taps for 1 colorless mana. So we can't use this mana for something that requires white or blue, but we can use it for any generic mana cost. In addition, we can pay a generic mana, tap and sacrifice the Mind Stone to draw a card. So this is a cheap mana rock, we call it, early on. And later, when we have plenty of lands and plenty of ways to make mana, we can just crack the Mind Stone and turn it into another card that we might be able to use better. Next up is the Mechanist, Aerial Artisan. For 2 and a blue, we get a 1/3 legendary human artificer ally that says whenever we cast a non-creature spell, we make a clue token. So this is not just like some of those cards that come in and make a clue. We get to make multiple clues every time we cast something that isn't a creature. Make multiple clues because we get 1 every time we cast something that isn't a creature. In addition, we can tap the Mechanist, and until end of turn, one of our target artifact tokens will become a 3/1 construct with flying until end of turn. So that means we can take the clue that gets made by this, or any other clue, or any other token artifact, and just make it a 3/1 flyer until end of turn. That's pretty nice. We can use this as a surprise blocker. We can use this to sneak in a little bit of damage. Pretty good either way. Next we have, Whirlwind Technique. We've already seen Whirlwind Technique, haven't we? Yes, we have. Lets us draw 2 and discard, and then we airbend 2 target creatures. We haven't seen South Pole Voyager, however. This card is great. 1 and a white for a 2/2 human scout ally that says whenever this creature or another ally we control enters, we gain 1 life, and if it's the second time this is resolved this turn, we draw a card. So ally is an important creature type in this deck. Notably, we have 27 allies. There are only 3 creatures in this deck that aren't allies. So South Pole Voyager says that our allies are going to gain us life every time they come in, and if we have 2 allies come in during the same turn, it will resolve a second time and we'll draw a card in addition to that life. But if we play 2 more allies, they're both just going to gain us life. This doesn't work every other time, it's just the second time each turn. Still, free card advantage. The Unagi, of course, will draw us 2 cards whenever an opponent draws their second card each turn. Next we have Coastal Piracy. This is actually a reprint from Magic, but it's with the pirates from the Water Scroll episode. 2 and double blue for an enchantment that says whenever a creature we control deals combat damage to an opponent, we may draw a card. It's a may, we don't have to, but we're probably going to. And it triggers on each creature we have that does that combat damage to one of our opponents. We've seen the Moon Spirit and the Ocean Spirit. It will draw us a card every time it becomes tapped. We've seen Waterbender Ascension. It lets us draw a card every time one of our creatures deals combat damage to a player when this has 4 counters on it. Now we have the Blue Spirit. Spoilers, but I may have lied when I said we couldn't put Zuko in this deck. 3 and a blue for a 2/4 legendary human rogue ally. It says we may cast our first creature spell we cast each turn as though it had flash. That means we can cast creature spells at instant speed, which means on our opponent's turns. And because we're only doing that once each of our opponent's turns, we can cast a creature spell on each opponent's turn, because it will be the first creature spell we cast. We just wouldn't be able to flash in another creature during that same turn, whether it's our opponent's or otherwise. And if we've already cast a spell at sorcery speed on our turn, then we can't flash another creature in, because that would not then be the first creature spell we cast that turn. However, in addition, whenever a non-token creature we control enters during combat, we can draw a card. That does not say during combat on our turn. So the way the Blue Spirit probably wants to play is not us attacking and then flashing in a creature using its first ability during our own combat. It's we want our opponents to attack us, and then we flash in a creature during combat as a blocker to mess up their combat math, and when we do that, we also draw a card. Thanks, Zooks. No one calls him Zooks. Don't listen to me. Finally, we have Jet Rebel Leader. Jet is a 3/4 legendary human rebel ally for 3 and a white that says whenever Jet attacks, we look at the top 5 cards of our library. We can put a creature card with mana value 3 or less from among them onto the battlefield tapped and attacking, and then we put the rest on the bottom in a random order. So this is a little bit different than those Water Tribe Ralliers. These are looking for something that's power 3 or less. Jet is looking for something mana value 3 or less. These put the card in our hand. Jet puts the card into play tapped and attacking. So if, let's say, we attack with Jet, we look at the top 5 and we see Tui and Law. Tui and Law are going to enter the battlefield tapped and attacking already. It's just as an attacker. That is not entering and then tapping, so it won't draw us a card off of Tui and Law, because it just comes in tapped. But assuming it survives, we've got it later, it will untap and put a counter on itself. Jet's nice to be able to give us bonus creatures, considering we'll have 28 others in our library, because Jet will already be out and our commander's in the command zone, presumably. So yeah, that covers our card advantage section. Let's take a look at acceleration now, which again I've just shorthanded as ramp. So we have our starting card is going to be Marble Diamond. Marble Diamond is an artifact that enters tapped. It costs 2 and it taps for white. That's all it is. A 2 mana rock, comes in tapped, but it gives us white mana. Similarly is Sky Diamond. We'll just talk about this first. It costs 2, enters tapped, and makes blue. These 2 diamonds are really nice ways for us to have quick access to the colors we need. We've seen North Pole Patrol. It counts as ramp because it can untap permanents we control, which includes our lands or even these diamonds if we wanted to do that. Next, we have Azorius Signet. For 2 generic mana, we have an artifact that we have to pay a mana into and tap it, but when we do, it makes 2 mana. So we're sort of tapping 2 mana sources, like a land and the Signet, and we're getting 2 mana, but it does filter that mana into the 2 colors we want. So it's not giving us more than we otherwise would have, but it's something else to add to our mana base beyond just our lands. Grand, of course, can possibly make our non-creature spells cost less. Not likely to happen, but that's why we're running a little bit more ramp than we really need to. Mind Stone, of course, we've already seen. It's a 2-mana rock that taps for colorless. Wayfarer's Bauble is next. Wayfarer's Bauble is a single generic mana for an artifact that doesn't do anything when it comes in or when it's around. But we can pay 2 mana, tap, and sacrifice it to do this effect, which is called Rampant Growth. We search our library for a basic land, we put that onto the battlefield tapped, and then we shuffle. So the Wayfarer's Bauble means we spend 3 mana over the course of 2 different moments, casting it and activating it, those don't have to be on the same turn, to find ourselves a basic land, whichever color we may need more of. Bender's Waterskin is next. I really like this card. This is a type of what we call Manalith. It's a 3-mana artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color. It also says, however, that we untap it during each other player's untap step. So this is terrific because it means we have access to mana on everyone's turn, but also it's an artifact. So even if we didn't want to tap it for mana, we could tap it to Waterbend, which is crazy because you can spend mana on Waterbending, but it's a nice thought for how it would work. So yeah, able to use our Waterbending abilities on other people's turns a little bit better because of our Bender's Waterskin. Next, we have Arcane Signet, an excellent card. 2 generic mana for an artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. So we've already seen Mind Stone and the 2 diamonds, and how those are 2 mana and can tap for either one or the other color or just a colorless mana. Arcane Signet taps for white or blue in our deck. So it's the best of them, but that's why we can only just have one of it. Yue, the Moon Spirit, gives us the ability to cast a non-creature spell from our hand without paying its mana cost. We just have to Waterbend 5, which means we might be paying some mana into it, but we might also not. We can tap creatures, we can tap artifacts, we can do either one, and then we're playing something out for free. That's acceleration. Next we have Momo, Friendly Flyer, a single white for a 1/1 flying lemur bat ally, who's also legendary, of course. The first non-lemur creature spell with flying we cast each turn, during each of our turns that is, costs 1 generic mana less to cast, which means Momo discounts the first flyer we cast on each of our turns as long as it isn't a lemur. So it's not discounting all of our spells, but quite a few of them, and it does help with our commander, which is helpful. In addition, whenever another creature we control with flying enters, Momo gets +1/+1 until end of turn, so a little bit stronger. Pretty nice for a 1/1 flyer for 1. Next, we have to play Sol Ring. Sol Ring is probably the most powerful card in the deck. It costs 1, it's an artifact, taps for 2 colorless. That's just great acceleration for us. We can't, of course, use colorless mana for something that requires white or blue pips, but if it needs generic mana pips, or if we have a waterbending cost or something, Sol Ring is giving us a lot more than we put into than we paid for it. Finally, we have another Princess Yue. This is Princess Yue rather than Yue the Moon Spirit. Princess Yue is 2 and a blue for a 3/2 legendary human noble ally, and we can tap her to scry 2. But when she dies, if she was not a land, if she was a non-land creature, we return her to the battlefield tapped under our control. She's a land named Moon. She gains tap to add colorless. She's still legendary. So she stops being a creature. She's just a land that taps for colorless mana. But we still have the ability to tap her to scry. So she can scry for us when she's a creature and after she's died and become the moon. Pretty good. I just want to be clear that when she's the moon, she can tap for mana or she can scry, but we can't tap her and do both. Tapping is the cost for 2 different abilities. We can only pay that cost for 1 ability per turn. So that covers our acceleration section. Let's take a look at our interaction, which again I've just shorthanded as removal. So a lot of our interaction comes in the form of airbending. Aang, the Last Airbender, lets us airbend a non-land permanent when it comes in. That's not permanent removal, but it does get something out of the way for now. Airbender's Reversal lets us airbend one of our things, so it's not quite removal, but it does let us destroy an attacking creature, and that is removal. Airbending Lesson, again, lets us airbend a non-land permanent, so does Glider Staff, 1 target creature that is. Watery Grasp lets us make a creature unable to untap, and if we then Waterbend 5 on it, that enchanted creature will shuffle it, that enchanted creature's owner will shuffle it back into their library. Next we have Inspired Insurgent. This is from the episode when they free a bunch of Earthbenders from a Fire Navy ship. 1 and a white for a 2/2 human peasant ally that says if we pay 1 and sacrifice this creature, we can destroy an artifact or enchantment. So it's getting rid of one of our creatures, but in the process we're getting rid of an artifact or enchantment that an opponent has. That's pretty great. Whirlwind Technique, of course, airbends 2 target creatures. Aang's Iceberg lets us exile a non-land permanent until the iceberg leaves the battlefield. We have another Momo. This is Momo Rambunctious Rascal, 2 and a white for a 1/1 legendary lemur bat ally with flying that says when he enters, he deals 4 damage to target tapped creature an opponent controls. Just does straight up non-combat damage. The creature we target has to be tapped already, but it's 4 damage for 3 mana, and it leaves behind a 1/1 flyer. Pretty good. Finally, we're using one of the source material cards because I just love this card and I'm glad that they reprinted it. Might be one of our more expensive cards in the deck, in fact. 2 and a blue gives us Imprisoned in the Moon. It's an aura that we can put on a creature, a land, or a planeswalker. So this is our planeswalker removal in the deck. It says Enchanted Permanent is a colorless land with tap to add a colorless and loses all other card types and abilities. So this lets us take a commander and lock it down. Basically do the same thing with it that Yui does to herself. Pretty good. I really like Imprisoned in the Moon. And also, what great art. What a great moment. Sad, but great. So that covers our support sections. We're going to go through some of the supplemental cards that help out our game plan without being specifically those sections of support. So we have a few cards tagged as tokens. These are cards that will make token creatures for us that we can use then to tap for our waterbending costs, or that we can pump up using the backside of our commander. When he attacks, we get to put a counter on all of our tapped creatures. So this is not a section that includes our non-creature tokens, just creature tokens. Starting with Kyoshi Battle Fan. This is another equipment, costs 2, it equips for 2, and it gives the equipped creature +1/+0, but when it enters, we make a 1/1 white ally creature token and then attach the Battle Fan to it for free. We don't have to pay the equip cost. So that means we're going to end up with a 2/1 white ally wearing this fan. We can also, like I mentioned before with the glider, tap the fan as part of our waterbending costs because it's just an artifact. Next we have Kyoshi Warriors. Gotta have the Kyoshi Warriors. 3 and a white for a 3/3 human warrior ally. When it enters, we make a 1/1 white ally creature token. Same kind of token we just made a moment ago. So we're paying 4 and we're getting a total of 4 power and toughness. Seems pretty good to me. We've seen the Mechanist. The Mechanist, of course, does not make non-creature tokens. He doesn't make creature tokens. He makes a clue. But we can turn our artifact tokens into 3/1 flying constructs with the Mechanist. So worth remembering that ability in our token section. Next, we have Suki, Courageous Rescuer. Now I know this is art of Suki from Chapter 3, but go with it. Suki is 1 and double white for a 2/4 legendary human warrior ally that gives all of our other creatures +1/+0. So really useful in this deck, and we've got to have a Suki to help us out. In addition, whenever another permanent we control leaves the battlefield during our turn, we make a 1/1 white ally creature token, but only once per turn. So that means every time we airbend one of our things, every time one of our creatures dies, one of our permanents has left the battlefield, and we'll get an ally to replace it. Pretty good. Finally, we've already seen Katara. When she enters, she makes that 1/1 white ally creature token. Good. So that covers our tokens section. Let's talk about the ways we can pump up our creatures. We have a few different ones that we've already seen. I think we've seen all but 2 of these, yeah. So Aang's Defense, of course, gives one of our blocking creatures +2/+2 until end of turn. Air Nomad Legacy gives all of our flyers a consistent, continuous +1/+1. Glider Staff and Kyoshi Battle Fan give +1/+1 and +1/+0, respectively, to their equipped creatures. We have not seen Yip Yip. For a single white, we have an instant, it's a lesson, that says target creature we control gets +2/+2 until end of turn, and if it is an ally, it also gains flying. So great. Another way to have a flyer which can then be affected by something like Air Nomad Legacy. Pretty good. We also have Acrobatic Leap. This is another reprint from Magic, but in one of the great episodes from Season 1. For a single white, we get an instant, not a lesson, that says target creature gets +1/+3 and gains flying until end of turn, and untap it. I do want to make mention that it does not say target creature we control. So in Commander, you can make deals with other people. It's called politicking. You can say to your opponent on the left, hey, I know you want to attack the next opponent over, but it's hard for you to get in because you don't have any flying. What if I were to give one of your creatures flying? Maybe if I do that, you won't attack me for the next 2 turns. That's a pretty good deal to make. Acrobatic Leap gives us the ability to do that kind of politicking. But even if we're just using it on our own creatures, and even if all we were doing was making one of our creatures bigger and untapping it so that we can block with it, maybe not even block a flyer, Acrobatic Leap is pretty great for just 1 mana. We've seen Suki, and of course, Suki lets us, gives us a consistent power bonus of +1 to all of our creatures. And of course, Katara doesn't give a constant bonus, but we can Waterbend X to give all of our creatures a new overwritten power and toughness based on whatever X was. So we can make all of our creatures quite big. That covers our pump section, but what about a more permanent form of pump in the form of counters? Normally in my decks, I don't put cards in the counters section that just put counters on themselves, but I wanted to show a few cards that fit into this deck, and that's really all they do, so I've made that exception for this. Starting with Avatar Enthusiasts. Everyone remembers this guy. 2 and a white for a 2/2 human peasant ally that says whenever another ally we control enters, we put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. So we've got a lot of allies in this deck, so this card is going to get quite big, quite fast. Zhangzhang's Deserters. We couldn't put Zhangzhang himself into this deck because he's red, but the Deserters are a nod to that episode. 1 and a white for a 1/2 human rebel ally that says when it enters, we put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. It doesn't have to be one of our creatures, but it sure ought to be. And it can be this creature. It doesn't have to be a different creature. So this can be a 2/3 for 2. Next we have our other shrine. It's the Southern Air Temple. 3 and a white for a legendary enchantment, Shrine. It says when it enters, we put X +1/+1 counters on each creature we control, where X is the number of shrines we control, and when another shrine that we control enters, we put a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control. So the same thing as the blue temple, or the blue shrine rather, except rather than cards, we're getting counters on all of our creatures. Either we already have the blue temple in play when this comes in, and we put 2 counters on all of our creatures, or this comes in first, every one of our creatures gets a 1/1 counter, and then the blue shrine comes in, triggers the second ability, and all of our creatures get another 1/1 counter. We've seen Teo already. Teo can let us put 1/1 counters on creatures we control when we attack with one or more flyers, draw, discard, and discard a non-land. Katara, of course, lets us put a 1/1 counter on her at our end step if she's tapped. Air Nomad Student, we have already seen. At the beginning of our end step, if it didn't attack, we get to put a 1/1 counter on it. And of course, Tui in Law gets a 1/1 counter on itself every time it becomes untapped. So that covers our counters in here. Let's talk about evasion. We have a lot of different ways to get past our opponent's defenses. Starting with this version of Aang, or this version of Appa rather. 3 and a white for a 2/4 legendary bison ally is Appa, Aang's companion. It has flying, and whenever it attacks, another target attacking creature without flying gains flying until end of turn. So we attack with 2 creatures, Appa and something that doesn't fly. Appa will trigger, and that non-flyer will become a flyer until end of turn. Pretty good. We've seen Appa Loyal Sky Bison. He gives another creature we control flying every time he enters or attacks. Now we have an instant. It's another lesson. This is Enter the Avatar state for a single white. It says, until end of turn, target creature we control becomes an avatar in addition to its other types and gains flying, first strike, lifelink, and hexproof. So it can't be targeted by any abilities or spells that our opponents control. When it does damage, we're going to gain life equal to the damage it deals. It's going to deal damage before normal damage in combat, and of course, it flies. So we don't have to target Aang with this, but that would be a flavor win. Next, we have the Glider Staff. Of course, it gives the equipped creature flying. North Pole Patrol. We can Waterbend 3 and tap it to tap a creature an opponent controls, which doesn't make one of our creatures evasive, but it makes it so that creature we tapped can't block. So it's a type of sort of indirect evasion. Yip Yip, of course, can give one of our creatures flying if that creature is an ally. We also have a mechanical glider. For 1 generic mana, this is another equipment. It equips for 2. It gives the equipped creature flying, and when it enters, we just attach it automatically to a creature we control. So this is called snapping on. Having it enter and automatically attach without us paying the equip cost. So just 1 to make something flying, and of course we can tap the glider for our waterbending costs, as I've mentioned. Acrobatic Leap also gives flying in addition to +1/+3 and untapping. And Waterbender Ascension has the ability that we can waterbend 4 and make one of our creatures unblockable until end of turn. Pretty good. Last section is about protection. We have 3 cards that can protect us in this deck. Enter the Avatar State, of course, gives the targeted creature hexproof. Cloud Shift is another reprint in the Avatar set. For a single white, it's an instant that says exile target creature we control and then return that card to the battlefield under our control. So that creature will leave play and will immediately re-enter play, all in the same resolution. If it has an enters trigger or a leaves the battlefield trigger, Cloud Shift is going to trigger those things because it is leaving the battlefield and then returning to it. We can do the thing that I've mentioned before, like blocking with this. Blocking with a creature we control, and as long as the creature we're blocking doesn't have trample, we can Cloud Shift our creature post declaration of blockers, but before combat damage, to make sure that creature stays blocked, but our creature lives, because it will just leave the battlefield and come back in, and it's now a new game object, no longer blocking that creature, but it was blocked, so Cloud Shift is very nice. Finally, of course, Waterbender Restoration lets us also flicker things, which of course is what Cloud Shift is doing, but it's a slow flicker, so we can protect our creatures this way. And that covers all of the spells in our deck. We're going to go over our lands pretty briefly. So I'm running 21 basic lands in this deck. The deck is a little more heavily white than blue, so I've got 1 more plains. I could have done a little bit more of a heavy shift over to white, but don't really need it. We're running a bicycle land. What that means is this is a land that's both a plains and an island on its own, but it comes in tapped. So we play this land, it enters tapped, but on later turns we can tap it for white or blue, but we can cycle it for 2, which means we pay 2 while it's in our hand and discard it to draw a card. So we can't do that while it's on the battlefield, but it gives us the ability to either turn this into, I want to pay 2, discard this and draw a card, or I want to play this as a tapped dual land. So irrigated farmland, you pay 2 and cycle it, so it's a bicycle. That's what people call it. We're also running a bounce land. Azorius Chancery is a land that comes in tapped, and when it does, we have to return a land we control to its owner's hand. Meaning, if we already had a plains and an island in play, if we play the Chancery, we've got to bounce one of those other 2 lands to our hand. If we didn't bounce a different land, we would have to bounce the Chancery, because it doesn't say return another land. It just has to be one of our lands. What's nice, though, is we can bounce a land we've already tapped for mana, so pretty good. And why are we going through all this rigmarole? Well, the reason is because Azorius Chancery doesn't tap for white or blue, it taps for white and blue. It taps for 2 mana. So it's pretty sweet to run these bounce lands in Commander, because you get a land that, even though you've gotten one of the lands you already had in play back into your hand, you haven't missed out on any mana, you just can't use it that turn. And the next turn, you know you're going to make your land drop because you just put a land back in your hand. We are running a check land. It's Glacial Fortress. Glacial Fortress felt thematically appropriate for Aang's Iceberg, but also it is a land that taps for white or blue, and it enters tapped unless we control a plains or an island. That means if we have any of these 21 basics in play, or if we have irrigated farmland because it is also a plains or an island, then Glacial Fortress will come in untapped. Now, the Chancery doesn't say plains or island in the type line, so it is neither of those things. So Glacial Fortress would come in tapped if that's all we had otherwise. But worth looking at our lands, because I think we have 23 total lands that are typed as basic, as an island or a plains. It's these basics, irrigated farmland, and 1 more we'll see in a moment. But first, we have Skyshroud Expanse, or Skycloud Expanse. This is Azorius Signet on a land. We've already seen that. This will come in untapped, but it doesn't tap for mana on its own. We have to put mana into it. But when we do, 1 generic and tap it, it makes 2. So just like that Signet, We do need extra mana, but it will filter it into one of each of the colors that we have in our deck. Next, we're running 6 fixing lands. So the best one of these is Command Tower. It is just Arcane Signet as a land. Comes in untapped, taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. So a white or a blue. Pretty great. Untapped dual land. We're also running Path of Ancestry, which is a tapped land that has the same text on it. Comes in tapped, we can tap it for white or blue, but when we use its mana to cast a creature spell that shares a creature type with our commander, we scry 1. Our commander, as you may recall, is a human avatar ally. We have 30 creatures in our deck, and 27 of them are allies. We have a bunch of humans, but most of those allies are humans. And of course, we only have one avatar, or 2 avatars rather. That's Aang and Aang. So yeah, most of the time in this deck, I mean, even if we only cap out at 27, we are looking at 27 of the cards in our 100 card deck that we're getting a free scry off of when we use the Path of Ancestry mana. Pretty nice. We're running a couple of, well, let's talk about Temple of the False God first. This is a land that taps for 2 colorless mana. Comes in untapped, taps for 2. It's Soul Ring on a land. We call this a soul land. It does have a big downside though. We cannot activate it unless we control 4 other lands. So we have to control a total of 5 lands and it counts itself. So this is like a Soul Ring on a land, but it's slow. We can't do it early in the game because we don't have enough lands in play. But once we do, this is a land that taps for 2 mana. That's ramp for us. In addition, we have Myriad Landscape. It comes in tapped and it only taps for 1 colorless. But if we pay 2 mana, tap it, and sacrifice it, we can search our library for 2 basics that share a land type. So either 2 plains or 2 islands. Then we put them on the battlefield tapped and we shuffle. They have to be basics. We can't go get that bicycle land, of course. But we are getting 2 lands into play when we only made 1 land drop. Even though it came in tapped, we had to pay mana into it and sacrifice it, and then those lands will come in tapped. So this is very slow ramp, but it is ramp. Finally, we've got 2 of these lands. These are fetch lands. They are new Capenna fetch lands, and they do the same thing in this deck. Obscura Storefront says when it enters, we automatically sacrifice it. We just do it as soon as it enters. And when we do, we search our library for a basic plains, basic island, or basic swamp, which we don't have any of in the deck. We put that on the battlefield tapped, we shuffle, and we gain a life. So free life gain, and we get to find a basic plains or islands, put it in the battlefield tapped. Broker's Hideout does the same thing, but instead of a swamp, I can find a forest. Neither of these has mana symbols on them, so they do not violate the commander's color identity rules. So in this deck, these are the same card. They come in, sacrifice themselves, we find an island or a plains, a basic one, and we put it on the battlefield tapped and we gain a life. Pretty good. We are running a gain land as well. Tranquil Cove, I thought was pretty appropriate for this water and air deck. It comes in tapped, and when it does, we gain a life, and it can tap for white or blue. Pretty good. We have another tap land in Temple of Enlightenment. It comes in tapped, it taps for white or blue, but when it enters, we scry 1. So this is a guaranteed scry, but only once, as opposed to Path of Ancestry, which doesn't always give us a scry, depending on what we're using the mana for. But every time we use it for an ally, or an avatar, or a human, we will get the scry. So more scries off of that, but a guaranteed one here. And of course, finally, we're running this Tango land, which is another Plains Island. So we can't find this with one of the things that finds us a basic, but it does count as a Plains or an island for our check land, our Glacial Fortress earlier. And it enters tapped unless we control 2 or more basic lands. So as long as we have 2 islands, 2 plains, or 1 of each in play, as long as they're basics, Prairie Stream will come in as an untapped dual. Pretty great for us. Finally, we're running 4 utility lands. Because it's Avatar, we had to run the dual land for this. This is a tap land that taps for white or blue. It's called North Pole Gates. But we can also pay 4, tap, and sacrifice it to draw a card. Very much like the Mind Stone we saw earlier. If we need this early for mana, we can use it. And later on, if we don't need it for mana anymore, it's a little expensive, paying 4 and tapping and sacrificing it, but we can do that to draw a card. We're running Demolition Field in this deck. Demolition Field is an untapped land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 2, tap, and sack it to destroy a non-basic land an opponent controls. So any land an opponent controls that isn't basic, isn't one of the 5 basic types. that person, the controller of that land, then gets to search their library for a basic land and put it on the battlefield untapped and shuffle. And so do we, because we just lost our demolition field. So neither player is down any lands. We just have basics in play now. And that's pretty good, because sometimes, you're not just looking at like dual lands. Sometimes players have lands in play that are very strong, and you need to get those off the battlefield because it plays more into their game plan and gets in the way of your own. For example, maybe they have Agna Kala. This is a land that comes in tapped unless we control a basic land. Just need one basic land. It taps for blue, or we can pay 2 and a blue and tap it to draw a card and discard a card. That's pretty good card selection for us. But it's not quite as good as the Abandoned Air Temple, which works pretty similarly. It enters tapped unless we control a basic, taps for white, or we can pay 3 and a white and tap it to put a 1/1 counter on each creature we control. We can do this every turn if we want to spend that mana every turn. This can really get out of hand, and so it's an appropriate target for Demolition Field, if you want to think of it that way. So that ends part 1 of this video. Thanks for watching. Again, be sure to like and subscribe if you are so inclined. And I'm about to go into part 2 and talk about the other version of this deck. So we've just seen Aang Swift Savior. Let's take a look at Aang Swift Savior upgraded. This deck is about going wide and getting bigger in the process. As in the previous version of the deck, Aang rewards us for having a lot of creatures, but we don't stop there. We make oodles of creature tokens for Aang to put counters onto, as well as a lot more non-creature artifact tokens that we can use to transform Aang, activate our other waterbending cards, or just spend for their own inherent value. We also run some self-bounce and flicker effects to further take advantage of the way that Airbending allows us to rebuy our enters triggers, and we have stronger forms of evasion, card advantage, mass pump, and even ramp. Like I said at the top of this video, the deck plays similarly to its original form in some ways, but it has enough decision points and synergies to build into something more complex and more powerful. You'll enjoy this deck if you like being rewarded for making careful choices about how you use your resources, or if you like amassing an army of allies who help your commander and are helped by him in turn. So a quick reminder about our deck building template is here. Yeah. As before, a little bit more obviously in this deck because it's less of a flavor deck. We've got 30 cards going toward our game plan, 30 more cards in the form of these support categories. We have a bunch of supplements. We are running a couple of Wraths, and we have 38 lands or so. So let's get to talking about this upgraded version. We've seen Aang already. We know how Aang works. So let's follow the same plan we did before and talk about Airbending. We are running very similar cards to before, but not all the same ones. We've seen Airbender's Reversal, lets us airbend one of our creatures or destroy an attacking creature. We've seen Appa, who lets us give a creature flying or airbend another non-land permanent we control when he enters or attacks. Airbender Ascension, we have not seen yet. So Airbender Ascension is 1 and a white for an enchantment that says when it enters, we airbend up to 1 target creature. Doesn't have to be ours. When a creature we control enters, we put a quest counter on this enchantment. It doesn't have to enter from being airbent, it's just whenever one of our creatures enters. And we've got, again, 30 creatures. Plus, it doesn't say non-token, and we've got a lot of token creatures as well. In addition, at the beginning of our end step, if this enchantment has 4 or more quest counters on it, we exile up to 1 target creature we control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. That's flickering, that's blinking. If you watch the first half of this video, you know that's just Cloud Shift. It's the same thing. We get a free one of those at our end step every turn, as long as we've got 4 more quest counters on Airbender Ascension. And we've got lots of creatures and other things in this deck that care about our creatures entering, or care about themselves entering. Airbender Ascension empowers all of that. Next, we're running Gyatso. I almost put this in the first version of the deck, but I wanted to keep the budget a little bit lower, and he's a couple of dollars. Gyatso is 3 and a white for a 3/3 legendary human monk that says whenever another creature we control becomes the target of a spell or ability, we may airbend that creature. So this is a protective card. It lets us put one of our creatures into exile when it would be affected by anything. This can be us affecting it with one of our things. It doesn't say a spell or ability your opponents control. So if, Appa enters, we can choose to airbend something we have Or we could choose to give it flying and have that trigger Monkeyatsu and airbend it that way. A little bit roundabout, but maybe it's fun. I don't know. Anyway, Monkeyatsu helps us protect our things and also rebuy our Ender's triggers with that very cheap airbending cost. Finally, I went back and forth about putting Aang Airbending Master in this deck because at present he's $15.50. I don't like to put cards that expensive in my decks, but maybe you pulled him in the pre-release. Maybe you opened him in a pack. Maybe you're willing to spend this money because he's a great card and he's a lot of fun. Aang Airbending Master is a 4/4 legendary human ally for 4 and a white. That says when he enters, we airbend another target creature. Again, it doesn't have to be ours. Whenever one or more creatures we control leave the battlefield without dying, we get an experience counter. Experience counters are counters that go on us as a player. And at the beginning of our upkeep, we make a 1/1 white ally creature token for each experience counter we have. So as long as our creatures are getting airbent, as long as they're getting flickered in other ways, maybe bounced to our hand, doesn't matter if they are tokens or anything else. Aang is going to give us that experience counter, and at the start of our turn, we're going to be able to get lots and lots and lots of these tokens, which we, of course, can use as just creatures and pump up and attack with them, but we can also use them to transform Aang with his waterbending ability, or activate any of our other waterbending abilities. So that covers our airbending section. Let's talk about our waterbending in this deck. We start with Katara, Bending Prodigy. We've already seen her. She gets a counter at the end step if she's tapped, and we can waterbend 6 to let her have us draw a card. Air Nomad Student, we've already also seen, beginning of our end step. If we didn't attack, or if it didn't attack, it gets a counter. Aang's Iceberg, we've already seen as well. It's Banishing Light with Waterbend 3 and to sack it to scry 2, but also we can flash it in. Yue, of course, we can Waterbend 5 and tap her to cast a non-creature spell from our hand without paying its mana cost. A little bit better in this deck because we have cards that are more expensive. Spirit Water Revival, we've not seen yet, so let's talk about. Spirit Water Revival is 1 and double blue for a sorcery with an additional cost of Waterbend 6. So that's quite a lot. If you think of that in terms of mana, this is a 9 mana spell. But Waterbend 6 is very achievable in this deck without spending a single bit of additional mana. It says draw 2 cards, and if this spell's additional cost was paid, instead, shuffle your graveyard into your library, draw 7 cards, and you have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. Either way, you exile this once it's resolved. So its floor is 3 mana to draw 2 at sorcery speed and exile it. That's just divination. Pretty okay. But if we're able to pay the additional cost, this is not a wheel effect because we're not having to shuffle our hand into our library as well. We only shuffle our graveyard into our library and then draw 7 on top of the cards we already had in hand. And we don't have a maximum hand size for the rest of the game. Pretty sweet as a draw spell. We've seen the Unagi. The Unagi lets us draw 2 cards every time an opponent draws their second card. And of course it has waterbending on it as its ward cost, so we're not really waterbending that, but nice to see. We've seen Katara, of course. She lets us waterbend X and make the power and toughness of all of our creatures X until end of turn. We can't do it during someone else's turn, and X has to be above 0, but those weren't really disadvantages. We want to use this to attack and win. Tui and Lua, of course, is in this section for the same reason as before. We want to use it to waterbend so that we can get that free card draw and then the counter on it when it becomes untapped. We've also seen Waterbender Ascension, also gets quest counters, and we can make our creatures unblockable by Waterbending 4. But we also have the Legend of Kuruk. This is the avatar 2 before Aang. His predecessor was Roku. Oh, I'm sorry, it's 3 before him, because Roku's predecessor was Kyoshi, and then this is Kuruk, who came before Kyoshi. For 2 and double blue, we get a Saga. So Sagas, if you haven't seen them before, they look like this. When they first come in, and at the start of our first main phase, which is right after we draw a card, they get a lore counter. Once they get their third lore counter, or their last lore counter, based on the number they have here, normally we sacrifice the Saga once its last trigger has left the stack. This one works a little different, however. So when the Legend of Kuruk first comes in, it will get its first lore counter. We will scry 2 and draw 1. At the start of our next turn's first main phase, we will put another counter on it. Again, scry 2 and draw a card. And then the turn after that, at the start of our first main phase, we will put a third counter on it and do this ability, which says exile this saga, then return it to the battlefield transformed under our control. So we don't have to sacrifice it because we're exiling it and bringing it back as Avatar Kuruk. This is a legendary creature avatar. Whenever we cast a spell, it says, we make a 1/1 colorless spirit creature token with this token can't block or be blocked by non-spirit creatures. So it's not able to block, but it sure is able to be tapped for waterbending. And if our opponents aren't running any spirit creatures, we can sure attack with it and they can't block our little 1/1. And we're going to get that every time we cast any spell. In addition, Avatar Kuruk has an exhaust ability. Exhaust abilities can only ever be activated once during the same game. And it says Waterbend 20. This is a huge ability. What does it give us? An extra turn. Pretty great. Pretty awesome. In addition to being a 4/3 that's making all these little friends, we can just get a free extra turn here. And if we want, what if we flicker Avatar Kuruk? What if we airbend Avatar Kuruk and recast? We get him back on the front side, which means we'll be able to scry 2 and draw. Is that preordain? Twice. Flip it back over, and now it's a new game object, and we can waterbend this and get another extra turn again. I'm not really an extra turns kind of player, but this is just a sweet card and really fun in our deck. So that covers our waterbending. We're going to go, as before, through our support cards, starting with our card advantage. We have a lot of changes here, though. So we're going to start with Disorder in the Court. This is X, a white, and a blue for an instant that says exile X target creatures, then investigate that many times. Return the exiled cards to the battlefield tapped under their owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So this is a great way for us to flicker our own creatures and get a bunch of clues, but also we can just hit our opponent's creatures with this. Like, they don't come back until the beginning of the next end step, but they come back tapped. So if we do this at instant speed, let's say on our opponent to the right's turn, and we hit all of the problem creatures on someone's playmat, or even all the problem creatures on all of our opponent's playmats, they all get exiled. We investigate. They won't come back to the battlefield until the next end step, which is our end step, so we can attack blithely. And then even if we didn't do it then, they're going to come back tapped. So if we did it on our turn, they'll be tapped for each other to attack. Let's say we did this on our turn, for example. We clear the board of all creatures on all of our opponent's playmats. We attack one of our opponents. Maybe we kill them, maybe we don't. Doesn't matter. Then we pass the turn, and at our end step, all of those creatures will come back tapped. And then our opponent to the left gets to take their turn, and they look around. Our creatures may be tapped because we attacked with them, but both of our other opponent's creatures are also tapped because they came back in tapped. And we could say, look, there's a reason I didn't attack you, because I want you to be able to finish off these other players. I think it's a pretty good deal to make. Plus, all of that to say, we can do this on our own creatures as well to protect them, and whoever we do it for, we're investigating. We're making clues the same number of times as X. So we can use all of those for waterbending or for drawing cards. Next we have Faramir, Prince of Ithilien. I'm not a Lord of the Rings guy, so if I mispronounce that, please let me know in the comments below how you should pronounce it. This is a 3/3 legendary human noble for 2, a white and a blue, that says at the beginning of your end step, choose an opponent. At the beginning of that player's end step, we draw a card if they didn't attack us that turn. They can still attack, just not us. And if they did attack us, we, during their end step, make 3 1/1 white human soldier creature tokens. So a lot of the times, we can remind our opponent, look, you can attack me if you want, but if you do, I'm just going to get 3 tokens that I can use for lots of things, in addition to attacking you next turn. If you don't attack me, yeah, I draw a card, but you can put your attacks towards someone else. Faramir is a great way for us to get 3 things that we care about for waterbending, and for pumping up, or just card advantage. Sally Sparrow is next. She's from the Doctor Who decks. 2, a white and a blue for a 2/3 legendary human detective. that says we may cast creature spells as though they had flash. So all these creatures that we were playing, we can play them on our opponent's turns or during our own combat or during our end step if we want, whatever we need. And in addition, whenever one or more other creatures we control leave the battlefield, we investigate, but only once each turn. So we can make clues whenever we flicker or airbend or bounce any of our creatures, or of course when they die. It's just once per turn and only one clue anytime any number of our creatures leave, but pretty good. Of course, we're running the Sad Robot. And these cards are, now that I'm looking at them, all out of order. I know I followed the order that we had for the prior deck because I was going in that order. Oh, I've got them sorted by price, that's why. Normally I go by mana value. So let's try this again with our draw spells. So, before Disorder in the Court, we'll talk about Skull Clamp. Skull Clamp, you probably know this card. It costs 1. It's an equipment that equips for 1. It gives the equipped creature +1/+1, and whenever that creature dies, we draw 2 cards. The reason this is in the deck is because we want to clamp our own creatures and let them die. We have a lot of 1/1 creatures, especially these ally tokens that we're making, or spirit tokens, or any other kind of little token creatures. Skull Clamp means if we pay 1 and sacrifice that creature, we draw 2. Because we're paying 1 to equip that creature, the -1 to the toughness will kill it, and when it dies, we draw 2. So 1 mana and a token to draw 2 cards, an incredibly good rate. Totally worth running. Get yourself a Skull Clamp. We've seen Disorder in the Court. Let's talk about this Dour Port Mage. 1 and a blue for a 1/3 Frog Wizard. It's a frog. It says, whenever one or more creatures we control leave the battlefield without dying, we draw a card. So that means when we bounce them, when we airbend them, when we flicker them, whatever it may be. In addition, for 1 and a blue and tap, we can bounce one of our creatures, return it to its owner's hand. That will trigger this first ability. We'll draw a card. Huzzah. Pretty good. You can already see, compared to the first deck, how synergistic this is and how we're getting so much value out of just doing the things that were kind of what we were already doing. Waterbender's Ascension, as we've already seen, lets us make our creatures unblockable for Waterbending 4, and whenever our creatures deal combat damage, we get a quest counter, and it turns into Coastal Piracy. It turns into Curiosity for all of our creatures. Reconnaissance Mission, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. Next is Archaeomancer's Map. 2 and a white for an artifact. Remember, it's an artifact, so we can still tap this to waterbend with if we want. And when it enters, we search our library for up to 2 basic planes cards, reveal them, put them in our hand, and shuffle. So we're just drawing 2 planes. And when a land an opponent controls enters, if that player controls more lands than us, we may put a land from our hand onto the battlefield. It's not playing a land drop. It's not like a, the typical like special action of playing a land, but we are getting a land into play. It's not coming in tapped, and it just means that no one is ahead of us on lands as long as we've got the Archaeomancer's Map in hand, basically. Waterbending Prodigy, of course, lets us waterbend 6 to draw a card. Sounds pretty good. We're also running Lauren of the Third Path. Lauren is 2 and a white for a 2/1 legendary human artificer. She has vigilance, and when she enters, we disenchant. We destroy a target artifact or enchantment. Pretty good. I love Lauren of the Third Path. She's my favorite Rec Sage. Also, we can tap her, and you and target opponent each draw a card. So this is a great way for us to politic, but at least we're getting cards, every turn that we want to tap Lauren, sort of no matter what. And we don't have to not attack with her. She's got vigilance. Next, we have Rumor Gatherer. I really like this card from Noncreature. 1 and double white for a 2/1 elf wizard with Alliance. Whenever another creature we control enters, we scry 1, and if it's the second time this is resolved this turn, we draw a card instead. So if we have 3 creatures come in, we're going to scry, we're going to draw, and then we're going to scry. Any other creatures that come in that same turn, we're just going to keep scrying. We only draw on the second time. But in this deck, that can be a bonus card every turn. Smuggler's Share is next, also from Noncreature, but from the Commander decks. 2 and a white for an enchantment that says at the beginning of each end step, we draw a card for each opponent who drew 2 or more cards this turn. Then we make a treasure for each opponent who had 2 or more lands enter the battlefield under their control this turn. So anyone who's drawing extra cards, we're also getting draws. Anyone who's doing any ramping with their lands, we're getting treasures. This is great because it's card advantage, and treasures ramp us, but they don't just ramp us. We can tap and sack our treasures for mana, of course, but we can also tap them to waterbend with them. We don't get to use them for mana as well that turn because they're tapped, but pretty nice to be able to just keep them in play and keep getting value out of our treasures rather than them being one and done. We've seen Spirit Water Revival, of course, and how it can either draw us 2 for 3, or if we pay 3 and then waterbend 6, it shuffles our graveyard into our library and draws us 7 and gives us no maximum hand size. I decided to run Winged Words in this deck. It's 2 and a blue for a sorcery that draws us 2 cards, and it costs 1 less if we control a creature with flying, because our commander flies. It's easy for us to get flyers into play, especially with our commander, so Winged Words is pay 2, draw 2. It's just a good rate. We've got Faramir, of course. Faramir can draw us a card. If on our turn on our end step we've chosen an opponent, and on their end step they haven't attacked us since then. Sally Sparrow, we've already seen, and how she can make us clue tokens. We've got the Sad Robot. Solemn Simulacrum is a 4-mana, 2/2 artifact creature golem. When it enters, we may Rampant Growth. Search our library for basic, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. And when it dies, we may draw a card. So the Sad Robot is great as a way to waterbend. It helps us ramp, and if we want to kill it somehow, we just get a card off of it anyway. Love the robot. We've seen the Blue Spirit already. Blue Spirit lets us draw cards when our non-token creatures enter during combat, and gives the first creature spell we cast each turn the ability to be cast as though it had flash. Pretty good. Legend of Kuruk, we've seen, it lets us preordain twice. And then, of course, maybe get a whole extra turn. It's so crazy. Tui and Law, of course, lets us draw a card when it becomes untapped. We also have Rabble Rousing. Really good for this deck. 4 and a white for an enchantment with Hideaway 5, which means when it enters, we look at the top 5 of our library, exile one of those cards face down under Rabble Rousing, and then we put the rest on the bottom in a random order. Then, whenever we attack with at least 1 creature, we make a number of 1/1 green and white citizen creature tokens equal to the number of creatures we have attacking. And then, if, including those new tokens, we have 10 or more creatures, we can play the card we exiled with Hideaway for free. So this is a free card that we got to choose from the top 5 when Rabble Rousing came in. We're going to have 10 creatures when we attack at some point. So Rabble Rousing giving us a free card, and then consistently doubling our creatures, doubling our attacking creatures every time we attack, just really gets out of hand. It's a good time. We're also running Tamio's Journal. 5 generic mana for a legendary artifact that says at the beginning of our upkeep, we investigate, so we just make a clue. So we're getting more and more artifact tokens that we can waterbend with, or of course, pay 2 and sack them to draw a card. Or we can tap the journal and sacrifice 3 clues to search our library for a card, put it into our hand, and shuffle. This is Demonic Tutor. This is just very powerful. It's not that hard to get 3 clues in this deck, but until we do, the journal is just pumping clues out for us and existing on the battlefield so that we can tap it for waterbending. Pretty good. That covers our card advantage section. We're going to go now to what we have in this deck's acceleration section. We're definitely upgraded here. We're not running the 2 diamonds anymore. The Marble Diamond and Sky Diamond have been replaced by 2 medallions. Pearl Medallion and Sapphire Medallion are the same card, but white versus blue. They cost 2. They are an artifact that makes our white spells, or blue for Sapphire Medallion, just cost 1 less to cast. So it doesn't actually produce mana for us. It just reduces the cost of all of those spells. So they're not useful for us for casting spells that are not that color, or spells that aren't any color if they're colorless spells. They're also not useful for spells that don't have a generic mana cost, because they only reduce the cost of the generic mana. But there are plenty of cards that will gain a big benefit from these medallions, and in addition, we don't have to tap them in order to produce mana, so we can tap these things for waterbending. Pretty nice bonus for that. Another comparable card is Talisman of Progress. As opposed to Azorius Signet, this costs 2, and it just makes mana on its own. It taps for colorless mana. If we want it to produce white or blue, however, we have to have it deal 1 damage to us. But generally, the way I think of this, if we have this in play, it's a 2-mana rock that's making mana. If we really need colored mana, it's worth the damage. Most of the time, we're going to be just making colorless mana, and if we really need the colored, it's nice to have the option. Just a nice upgrade over the Signet. We're also running Springleaf Drum. 1 generic mana for an artifact that if we tap it and a creature we control that's untapped, we get to make 1 mana of any color. So it just produces mana for us as long as we've got a creature to tap as well, and we've got plenty of little token creatures floating around. If we don't do that, however, we can still tap the drum on its own as part of a waterbending cost. We've seen the Archaeomancer's map, we've seen the Bender's Water Skin, maybe my favorite Manolith that's been produced recently. We're also running Claim Jumper from Outlaws of Thunder Junction. 2 and a white for a 3/3 rabbit mercenary with vigilance. I don't know why it doesn't have reach. Rabbits should be able to jump, and it's way up on top of a cliff, I'm just saying. Anyway, when it enters, if an opponent controls more lands than us, we may search our library for a plains and put it on the battlefield tapped, and then if an opponent controls more lands than us still, we get to repeat the process once. And if we search our library, we get to shuffle. So the Claim Jumper says, does anyone have more lands than you? Okay, go find a plains. Now you've got it on the battlefield. Does anyone still have more lands than you? All right, you can find yourself 1 more plains. That's great. And because it's an enters trigger, and we have flickers, airbending, and rebuying using unsummons in this deck, we can Claim Jumper and make sure no one's ever got more lands than us. In addition, even though this puts the plains on the battlefield tapped, it does not say a basic plains. So we have a couple of dual lands in this deck, much like we did in the earlier version of the deck, and you could even upgrade this further to have even better dual lands that you might be able to find with the Claim Jumper. Next, we have Oketra's Monument. 3 generic mana for a legendary artifact that makes all of our white spells cost 1 less to cast, as long as they are creature spells. So not quite as good as that Pearl Medallion, because it only affects creature spells, and it costs 1 more. But it also says whenever we cast a creature spell, we make a 1/1 white warrior creature token with vigilance. So a 1/1 token with vigilance, already better than many of these allied tokens we're making, and it's whenever we cast a creature spell. Again, we've got 30 creature spells in the deck, including our commander, and we're rebuying them. It doesn't say cast a creature spell for its mana value either, for its mana cost either, so we can cast it for just the 2 generic that we've airbended away from. Seems great. We've seen the Smuggler's Share, we've seen the Sad Robot, and we've seen Yue. All of these give us good ways to have card advantage. And if I remember correctly, I believe, oh, this is all actually acceleration, but I was going to say, I believe all of the card advantage we have in this deck is actual card advantage, not just selection. So pretty nice. So let's talk now about our interaction. We have a little bit more premium removal in this deck. Path to Exile and Swords to Plowshares have 1 difference but are otherwise the same card. They both cost a single white mana, they both are instants, and they both exile target creatures. And they both give that creature's controller a kickback. Swords to Plowshares gives that creature's controller life equal to the creature's power. Path to Exile lets that creature's controller rampant growth. They search for a basic, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. Both of these are excellent. Swords to Plowshares, of course, is better, but running both in your white deck, I wouldn't say it's compulsory, but it's a good idea. We've seen Airbender Ascension. It is removal because it can airbend something. It's not permanent removal, but it doesn't have to be. Airbender's Reversal also destroys an attacking creature. We are also running Bumbleflower's Sharepot from Bloomburrow. For 2 generic mana, we get an artifact that enters and makes a food token. So we're paying 2 and we're getting 2 artifacts, both of which we can use for waterbending, of course. Or we can crack the food. Food, of course, is an artifact that says pay 2, tap and sack it to gain 3 life. Nice way to get a little life in case we need to. But we can also crack the Sharepot by paying 5, tapping and sacking it, and we get to destroy a non-land permanent. We can only do this at sorcery speed, but this is good removal that hits anything that isn't a land. Sounds great. We've seen Disorder in the Court. It is not permanent removal, but slow flickering all of our opponent's creatures, and then they come back tapped, or at least all the ones we want to pay for. Pretty good. Aang's Iceberg is Banishing Light, but with Flash, and the ability to crack it later to scry. Pretty good. I like to run Emergency Eject in my white decks. Let me know in the comments if I'm crazy, but I think this is, if I'm not planning to hit a land, this is better than Generous Gift, and it's better than Stroke of Midnight, because our opponent has to pay to get advantage out of the lander token. But what does it do? 2 and a white for an instant. It says destroy target non-land permanent, just anything. And then its controller makes a lander token, which is the Wayfarer's Bauble. It's an artifact that for 2 and tap and sack, they get to go rampant growth. Seems good. We probably aren't going to use this on our stuff, but if we were to need to for some reason, then we've got a lander token. We can use that to waterbend with. We've seen Lorna the Third Path. She is a Reclamation Sage. She destroys an artifact or an enchantment when she enters. We've got Touch the Spirit Realm as well. This is another Oblivion Ring effect. 2 and a white for an enchantment that says when it enters, we exile up to 1 target artifact or creature until this enchantment leaves the battlefield. Much like Aang's Iceberg, but it can't hit anything other than artifacts and creatures. So we can't get rid of enchantments with this, or planeswalkers, that kind of thing. However, it does have a channel ability. So while it's in our hand, we can pay 1 and a white and discard it to exile an artifact or creature and return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So another slow flicker effect. It doesn't have to be one of our creatures or artifacts, but it sure can be. We've seen Aang Airbending Master, of course. Aang is just very nice, and he comes in and airbends a creature. That gets it out of our way. And we're running Junkwinder, because I love running Junkwinder every time I can. It's just a card that just gums up the board, and it's just a lot of fun. This is a 5/6 Serpent for 5 and double blue that has affinity for tokens, which means this 5 generic mana is reduced by 1 for every token we control. Doesn't matter what kind of token it is. A creature, a clue, a treasure. If we got that lander token somehow, any of those will reduce this. So it might be a 5/6 for just double blue. And it says whenever a token we control enters, we tap a non-land permanent that an opponent controls, and it doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. This predates the use of stun counters, so they just have to remember. But every time we have a token come in, we get to tap something down, and it's not untapping during that next untap step. This is a great way for us to get in and be evasive with all of our opponent's creatures tapped down. Junkwinder's a good friend. That covers our removal spells. We're going to look at our 2 Wraths. We're running Aetherize, because I think Aetherize is a lot of fun, and they reprinted it in Foundations, so why not? 3 and a blue for an instant that says return all attacking creatures to their owner's hand. We usually will use this. It's not really a real Wrath, because it's not killing anything, but it is getting rid of everything. So it's not as horrible as Settle the Wreckage, but if our opponent's saying, you don't have anything good, or all of your stuff is tapped, I swing out, we say, okay, bounce all your stuff back to your hand. But Aetherize is also great in this deck because it is a way, maybe, for us to attack with our stuff. Maybe we do damage, and then after the combat damage step, during the end of combat step, we can Aetherize our own attacking creatures so that we can rebuy them again. A very niche use of Aetherize, but it's one that will work for this deck. We're also running Elspeth's Sun's Champion. This is our Planeswalker. If you haven't seen Planeswalkers before, the way they work is we pay 4 and double white, and we get Elspeth. She's a legendary Planeswalker named Elspeth. She has 4 loyalty counters on her. She comes in with those counters. Then, once per each of our turns, at sorcery speed, we can pay the cost of one of her loyalty abilities. Either the cost of putting a counter on her, she'd go up to 5, taking 3 off of her, she'd go down to 1, or taking 7 off of her, which we can't do until she's gotten up to high enough for that. This is once per turn at sorcery speed, but we can do it the turn she comes in. In addition, Elspeth can be attacked by our opponent's creatures. Rather than attacking us, they can say, I swing my creature at Elspeth. We can then block, if we want to, the same way we would be able to block as if they were attacking us. But if they do any damage to Elspeth, each damage they do takes away 1 of her loyalty. And when she drops to 0 loyalty, she goes to the graveyard. So she's not a creature, but that's the way we use Elspeth. But what does she actually do for us? Well, if we +1 her, which we can do, again, right when she comes in, she makes 3 1/1 soldier creature tokens. Just 3 tokens for us that we can waterbend with, that we can pump up. Terrific. We can also destroy all creatures with power 4 or greater. That would destroy our commander on his backside, but it does not destroy him on the front side, so this is a nice Wrath for big stuff. And if we're somehow able, if our opponents are crazy enough to let us get Elspeth's Sun's Champion up to 7 loyalty, and we can untap with her, we can -7 her to get an emblem with Creatures you control get +2/+2 and have flying. Emblems are like enchantments, kind of, but they exist in the command zone. They cannot be interacted with. And that means that for the rest of the game, the rules have changed. All of our creatures get a constant +2/+2 and all have flying for the rest of the game. Can't stop it. Elspeth's Son's Champion, excellent use in this deck. If I don't mind, if I do say so myself. So let's talk now about our supplemental categories. We're going to talk about our tokens. We have two different kinds. We're going to start with our regular creature tokens first. We'll begin with Adeline, Resplendent Cathar. 1 and double white gives us a legendary human knight that is a star 4. Her toughness is 4, and her power is equal to the number of creatures we control, and she has vigilance. In addition, whenever we attack, it doesn't say whenever Adeline attacks. All we have to do is attack with any number of our creatures, even just one of our own 1/1s. Then, for each opponent, we make a 1/1 white human creature token that's tapped and attacking that player or a planeswalker they control. So we attack with anything, and we make 3 tokens. They're all, assuming we have 3 opponents. Each one is going at a different opponent, and if any of them survive, they just get to survive. And Adeline, her power continues to grow. We've seen Oketra's Monument. It gives us a 1/1 white warrior with vigilance every time we cast a creature spell. Does not have to be a white creature spell. We've seen Suki. Suki is much better in this deck because we have so many other tokens, but also gives us that extra ally every time one of our permanents leaves the battlefield during our turn, which we're doing a lot more of as well. Also, from the Clue set, we have Apothecary White. 3 and a white for a 3/4 legendary human cleric with vigilance that says whenever we attack, we create a food token for each player being attacked. So we're making tokens that, of course, we can waterbend with whenever we attack with any creature. It doesn't have to be the apothecary. And as long as we're attacking multiple opponents, we get multiple foods whenever we do that. We can also pay a white and tap the apothecary and tap any number of foods that we control to make that same number of white human creature tokens. So we can get ourselves sort of doubling our foods, doubling our tokens in that way. And our foods are now tapped, so we can't waterbend with them this turn, but we sure can next turn, in addition to all those 1/1 humans we made with them. We've seen Faramir. Faramir can make us 3 human soldiers, as long as we got attacked by the player we chose and told them not to attack us. Genku, Future Shaper, is really great in this deck, from Modern Horizons 3. This is a 2/5 legendary Moonfolk wizard for 2, a white, and a blue. Genku says whenever another non-token permanent we control leaves the battlefield, again, leaves any way, could be flickered, could be airbent, could die, doesn't matter. We choose one of the following that hasn't been chosen this turn, and we create a creature token with those characteristics. We make a 2/2 white fox with vigilance, a 1/2 blue merfolk with flying, or a 1/1 black rat with lifelink. So it says it has to be one that has not been chosen this turn, which means we can only make one of each of these, so a total of 3 tokens each turn. We're probably not going to get that every time, because we're not as hardcore of a blink deck as Genku probably wants us to be in, but we're still going to get a couple of these, and whatever we may need the most, flying, lifelink, vigilance, we can get it. In addition, Genku says for 3, a white and a blue, we put a 1/1 counter on each creature we control. So those tokens, Genku himself, or themselves rather, everything we may need. Very nice. We've seen the Legend of Kuruk, it's disgusting. We've seen Aang Airbending Master, it's really cool. And we've seen Katara Water Tribe's Hope. Really like this card. Rabble-rousing is great, but we also have Virtue of Loyalty. Virtue of Loyalty is an enchantment with an adventure. This is 2 spells in 1. The way an adventure works, if you haven't seen them before, is while this is in our hand, we can either cast it as an enchantment, and then it has this text on it, and we ignore the adventure. Or we can cast it as the adventure, Arden Vale Fealty, and when we do, as it resolves, we will exile it, and we are allowed to cast the enchantment from exile. So we can either do the instant and then the enchantment, or we can just do the enchantment, but we can't go enchantment then instant, just worth noting. So the instant, Arden Vale Fealty, is 1 and a white for an adventure that says make a 2/2 white knight creature token with vigilance. So vigilance is great because we can attack with it and then post-combat waterbend with it. Pretty good. And Virtue of Loyalty says at the beginning of your end step, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, and untap those creatures. So remember, our commander's backside puts a counter on all of our creatures that are tapped. Virtue of Loyalty, therefore, lets us have our cake and eat it too. Because this knight is never going to get counters on it from our commander unless we use it to Waterbend, since it has Vigilance. But if we do Waterbend or attack with our creatures and get counters on them because they're tapped now thanks to our commander, we then go to our end step, put an additional counter on each of those creatures, and untap them so we can block with them too. Virtue of Loyalty is a great card in this deck. We've seen Elspeth and how Elspeth can make us some soldier creature tokens. Now we have Sanctuary Warden, also from New Capenna. 4 and double white for a 5/5 Angel Sword soldier with flying that enters with 2 shield counters on it. Shield counters are a special type of counter. What they mean is whenever the Sanctuary Warden would either A, take damage, or B, be destroyed. Instead, we replace that event by removing a shield counter. It's the same as a stun counter replacing an untapped. If we do 2 damage to the Sanctuary Warden, it'll lose a shield counter. If we do 2 more damage to it, it'll lose a stun counter, or a shield counter rather. If we do any more damage to it after that, it just takes the damage. But if we do 2 damage to it and it loses a shield counter and then we cast Murder on it, that would just destroy it without doing damage. But the shield counter prevents that too. So it protects itself a little bit. In addition, whenever it enters or attacks, so really nice to flicker this thing, or airbend it, we may remove a counter from a creature or planeswalker we control. We can take a counter off Elspeth, we can take +1/+1 counters off of things, we can take one of these shield counters off the Sanctuary Warden. And if we do take one of those counters off, we draw a card and we make a 1/1 green and white citizen creature token. So very nice. Is Sanctuary Warden not listed in our draw section? Am I crazy on that? Nope, it is. I just didn't say it. Am I out of my mind? Did we not finish this? Am I out of my mind? Oh, we just didn't scroll down to it. Or I didn't notice it. Thanks for letting me know, viewers, that I'm missing things. So, alright. Next up, for continuing our token section, is Overlord of the Mistmoors. This is 5 and double white for a 6/6 enchantment creature avatar horror. That's a lot, but notice, it's an avatar, which means that we can use Path of Ancestry to cast this and get a trigger to scry, since it shares a creature type with our commander. The Overlord says whenever it enters or attacks, we make 2/1 white insect creature tokens with flying. We make 2 moths. They're gross. But it doesn't say this creature enters, it says this permanent. The reason is because it has impending 4 for 2 and double white, which means instead of casting it for 5 and double white and getting a 6/6 creature, we can cast it for 2 and double white. And if we do, it will enter and not be a creature while it has the 4 time counters on it. It comes in with 4 time counters on it. While it has those counters, it's not a creature. And at the start of our end step, we take a time counter off of it. So basically, we're paying 4 mana to get 2/1 flyers. And then a few turns later, this will become a real boy. And it'll be a 6/6 that whenever we attack with it, will give us 2 more counters. Or 2 more creatures, rather. Tokens. Or we can just pay full retail for it, get it out right away. Pretty good. It is worth recognizing, however, that this is not like Bestow or anything like that. It is a creature on the stack no matter how we cast it. So we will trigger with Path of Ancestry for that. It's just if we cast it for its impending cost, when it enters and it already has those 4 time counters on it, and it won't be a creature in play. This is similar, I guess, to how the Theros gods work with Devotion, whether or not they enter as a creature or just an enchantment. Yeah. Finally, another Duskmourn card, we have a room. It's Dollmaker's Shop and Porcelain Gallery. The way this works, it looks intimidating, but it's not that bad. It's a split card. When it's in our hand, we choose which half of it we want to cast. Let's say we want to cast Dollmaker's Shop. This is called a door, and this is another door. If we cast Dollmaker's Shop, we'll pay 1 and a white, and this card will enter with the Dollmaker's Shop door unlocked and the Porcelain Gallery door locked. That means this is an enchantment that only has this text on it, just the side that we paid for. Then at sorcery speed, we can pay the cost of the other side and unlock it as well, and now the enchantment will have both sides worth of text. We can, of course, cast it as Porcelain Gallery first, and then unlock Dollmaker's Shop if we want. Either way you want to do it. But that's how it works. You have to pay the entire cost to get both sides, but you do it 1/2 at a time. So Dollmaker Shop says whenever one or more non-toy creatures, we control attack a player, we make a 1/1 white toy artifact creature token. So we get a little 1/1 friend. It's an artifact, kind of relevant for some things, but at the very least, it's a 1/1. And we get that as long as we attack any player with anything that isn't a toy. Porcelain Gallery says all of our creatures have base power and toughness, each equal to the number of creatures we control. So if we've got 10 creatures in play, every one of them has a base power and toughness 10/10. Porcelain Gallery is very strong. It's a big pump for us. We really like that. And we can get to it having pumped out a bunch of little toys before we even unlock the door to the Porcelain Gallery. Pretty sweet. That will cover our tokens. Now let's talk about our non-creature tokens, since all of those were creature tokens. We've seen all of these cards. Bumbleflower Shared Pot comes in and makes a food. Disorder in the Court makes us a whole bunch of clues. Smuggler's Share can make us treasures. Apothecary White makes us food, and we can make human creature tokens with that as well. Sally Sparrow lets us investigate, so make a clue. And Tamio's Journal gives us clues every upkeep. So all of these are great ways to get value from those tokens, but also have them around when we want to use them for waterbending, since we don't have to tap our creatures, we won't have to tap our creatures since we will have so many little artifact tokens as well. So I have a section called Blink and Bounce. I didn't want to put them in two different sections and separate them out since they're doing a similar thing in our deck. So these are both ways to rebuy our effects. We get to put things back in our hand, or flicker them, or have them enter again, however we want to do it. Disorder in the Court, of course, is a slow flicker effect. We can hit our own creatures with it if we want. We've seen Dour Portmage and how it will bounce for 1 and a blue and tap a creature we control to our hand. And of course it says whenever one or more other creatures we control leave the battlefield without dying, we draw a card. So that's going to trigger off of any of these things. This is sort of like a supplement to the Airbending section. We're also running Crystal Shard. I love Crystal Shard. 3 generic mana for an artifact that says if we pay 3 and tap it, or we just pay 1 blue and tap it, we can return target creature to its owner's hand unless its controller pays 1. So this looks like a really crummy way of bouncing an opponent's creature. But what it actually is we pay a blue and tap, and we return one of our creatures to our hand unless we pay 1. So we just choose not to pay the 1, so it comes back to our hand, and we get to rebuy it that way. We can do this with our commander if we really want to, because our commander, as you may recall from the start of this video, has flash and can airbend a spell on the stack. So this is a great way to turn our commander into just interaction. We can do this when an opponent casts a spell. They say, I'm casting, Wrath of God. And we say, okay, in response, pay a blue, tap Crystal Shard to return our commander to our hand. We choose not to pay the 1, so it'll return. Then we recast our commander and airbend your Wrath of God. And then we can do that again if we've still got the mana for it. Pretty fun. We're running Soul Herder, so we can have some consistent blink in our deck. 1 a white and a blue for a 1/1 spirit that says whenever a creature is exiled from the battlefield, we put a 1/1 counter on this creature. That means if it's exiled using Airbending, if it's exiled using Blink effect, if it's exiled using Path to Exile or Source to Plowshares, anytime a creature, not one that we control necessarily, is exiled from the battlefield, Soul Herder gets bigger. And in addition, at the beginning of our end step, we may exile another target creature we control and then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. So we get to do an immediate flicker, a blink, at the end of our turn, which of course will trigger the Soul Herder and make it bigger. Pretty good. We've seen Touch the Spirit Realm and how we can channel it to do a slow flicker on an artifact or a creature. And we're also running Restoration Angel. Beautiful Johannes Voss art, maybe my favorite Magic artist, love Johannes Voss. 3 and a white for a 3/4 angel with flash and flying, and when it enters, we may exile a non-angel we control and then return it to the battlefield under our control. That's great. Just a straight up flicker. It protects our creatures. It triggers a bunch of other things like Soul Herder and Dour Portmage. Just lovely. Next is our pump section. These are a few ways to make our creatures bigger. We've seen a few of them. Suki, of course, gives all of our creatures +1/+0. we have not seen Thistledown Liege. Thistledown Liege is a 1/3 Kithkin Knight with Flash for 1 and triple Azorius hybrid mana. So what can we do with this? 1 and triple white, 1 and triple blue, 1 and a white and double blue, or 1 a blue and double white. Yeah. Like I said, it has Flash. It gives all of our white creatures +1/+1 and all of our blue creatures +1/+1 other than itself. So a great way to, for some of our creatures, like for example Katara, for Thistledown Liege to come in and give it +2/+2 because it is white and it is blue. So it gets both of those effects. Pretty nice little Anthem effects there. Katara, of course, we can Waterbend X, and until end of turn, all of our creatures have base power and toughness XX. Elspeth's Sun's Champion, if we're able to ultimate her, gives all of our creatures +2/+2 and flying. Pretty good. Next we have Sigarda's Summons. 4 and double white for an enchantment that says creatures we control with +1/+1 counters on them. So, you know, all those creatures that were tapped when our commander attacked, the backside of our commander, have base power and toughness 4/4, have flying, and are angels in addition to their other types. So this just persists as long as our creatures have 1/1 counters on them and Sigarda's Summons is on the battlefield. Base power and toughness 4/4 is pretty great. Flying is great. Doesn't give any sort of actual pump to it other than increasing, hopefully, increasing the power and toughness. But this is going to be an increase for a lot of our tokens, so it counts in this section. It is worth noting that this says base power and toughness 4/4. So this is a power and toughness setting ability. If this is in play, and then we activate Katara, Katara's ability will overwrite the 4/4. If we've activated Katara's ability, and then we play Sigarda's Summons, Sigarda's Summons will overwrite Katara's ability for the relevant creatures. It is the same kind of effect, the same kind of layer, so it goes off of timestamp. But Sigarda's Summons is consistent, so probably not worth worrying about. It will make some of our creatures smaller, like Moonshaker Cavalry, for example, but still okay. I guess a little bit more relevant would be Sigarda's Summons making everything a 4/4, and Porcelain Gallery making everything base power and toughness equal to the number of creatures we control. So if we have Porcelain Gallery already unlocked, we probably don't want to play Sigarda's Summons, just because it may make everything smaller. But nice to have some redundancy here, and it may be the case that Sigarda's Summons doesn't make everything quite as big as the Gallery does, but it sure does give everything flying, so that might be relevant to us as well. Finally, we have Moonshaker Cavalry in this section from Wilds of Eldraine. 5 and triple white, so pretty expensive for a 6/6 flying Spirit Knight, but it says when this creature enters, creatures you control gain flying and get +X/+X, where X is the number of creatures you control. This does not set the base power and toughness, this is just a bonus to all that power and toughness. So all of our creatures get really big and fly, and there we go. If we attack, and our creatures don't have vigilance, and we're attacking with the backside of our commander, they're also going to get a +1/+1 counter in the process, so might as well. So that is our pump section. Let's take a look at our counters section. It only has 2 cards in it because, like I mentioned, in the first version of this deck, I included in this section cards that put counters on themselves. I typically don't do that. I want cards that are going to do this for our other creatures. So Genku, of course, we can pay 3 a white and a blue to put a counter on each of our creatures, and Virtue of Loyalty will put a counter on each of our creatures at the beginning of our end step. We next have an evasion section. We've seen most of these actually. Waterbender Ascension, we can Waterbend 4 to make a creature unblockable until end of turn. Herald of Secret Streams is 3 and a blue for a 2/3 Merfolk Warrior that says creatures we control with 1/1 counters on them can't be blocked. Just attack with the backside of our commander up. All of our attacking creatures are now tapped. They get counters on them. Herald of Secret Streams says now they can't be blocked. That all happens, of course, before blockers can be declared, so they're not going to be declared, unless, of course, they remove the Herald before blocks would happen. So yeah, this can really just kill people. We've seen Appa, of course. Appa can give one of our creatures flying until end of turn when he enters or attacks. Elspeth can give all of our creatures flying if, of course, we get that emblem off. Sigarda's Summons gives all of our creatures flying, that have counters on them at least, and Moonshaker Cavalry has an enters trigger that can give our creatures flying as well. I do want to mention again about Moonshaker Cavalry, this is an enters trigger. So if we flicker it, it happens again. So if we airbend it and recast it, it happens again. We can get this over and over and over. Just disgusting. Our last section of spells is our protection section, and we've seen all of these. Distorter in the Court can protect our creatures by slow flickering them. Dour Port Mage, we can protect them by bouncing them. Crystal Shard lets us also bounce our creatures. Touch the Spirit Realm can protect our creatures by slow flickering them again. Monk Gyatso can airbend our creatures, and Restoration Angel can just do a regular flicker of our creatures, as long as they're not angels. So yeah, lots of ways to protect our creatures, especially our commander, if we really want to. And the nice thing about that is if we were to, let's say, Restoration Angel, or slow flicker with Touch the Spirit Realm, or even airbend with Monk Gyatso, if we do that to our commander, while our commander is back face up, when it comes back from the flicker or we recast it or whatever, it's going to come back front face up, which means it will get to airbend something again. It will get to redo this over and over and over, re-waterbend, maybe get some more value out of that beyond just flipping it over. Pretty nice. Lots of good things. And one time I do want to mention this once more, this waterbend ability is not at sorcery speed. So if someone attacks us with like a 4/4 angel while Aang is front face up, we can waterbend, transform Aang, and block with our 5/5 reach commander. Pretty sweet. That covers all of our spells. Let's go now into our land base and take a look at what we've done differently with this version of the deck. We're running a few fewer basics. We're still heavier on white than we are on blue. I went a little more of a differential this time, but it works out to be about the same. I guess you could run 8 and 9 and that would be all right too. We're still running Irrigated Farmland as our bicycle land. We have Bounce Land here in Azorius Chancery, of course. We're running our Glacial Fortress check land, but we also, in addition to the Skycloud Expanse, have a second filter land. A couple more dollars for a little bit more of a premium filter land in Mystic Gate. Mystic Gate comes in untapped and taps for colorless, or we can pay a white or a blue into it to tap it for double white, double blue, or one of each. So this is filtering a little bit more flexibly than our Skycloud Expanse, and it taps for colorless mana on its own, as opposed to the Expanse, which needs mana to pay into it to tap for mana at all. I would say Mystic Gate is strictly better, except for the fact that it requires colored mana to filter into making colored mana of its own, whereas the Skycloud Expanse only needs generic mana. So they both have a good role in here, and they're both worth running. We are running the same 6 fixing lands as before, but we have a few premium upgrades here in the next section. Adakar Wastes is a pain land. It is, as a land, the same thing as that Talisman of Progress we saw earlier. Comes in untapped, taps for colorless, or we can tap it for white or blue if we're willing to let it do a damage to us. And just like with the Talisman, it's worth taking that damage in order to make colored mana, when most of the time we only need it for the colorless. Pretty sweet. I like the Pathways, and they're only a couple of dollars, so we might as well run the one for our deck. Hingegate Pathway is an untapped land that taps for white on the front face, but it's a modal double-faced card, so we can also run it as Mistgate Pathway on the back and tap it for blue, and it comes in untapped, of course. What's especially nice about this is not only does it give us exactly the color we need when we are able to play it, but we have the unusual, or like it doesn't happen that often, kind of interaction with a bounce land. Maybe we play it on the blue side because that's what we're looking for, but then we play our Azorius Chancery. It comes in and we have to bounce a land. We can bounce our Mistgate Pathway. Now it's back in our hand, and we can replay it as the Hingegate Pathway side, or vice versa. Just it doesn't come up that often, this interaction, but when it does, it feels really nice to be able to fix your mana both different directions. We're still running our Temple of Enlightenment, but we're also running Deserted Beach. This is a slow land. I don't usually run slow lands in my deck, but it's actually a little bit cheaper than our Pathway, so might as well. This is a land that comes in tapped unless we control 2 or more other lands, and it taps for our colors. I know this sounds familiar, and it should, because it's basically the same as Prairie Stream, except Prairie Stream comes in untapped if we control 2 or more basic lands. So Deserted Beach only requires us to have 2 or more lands of any type in order for it to come in untapped. The only advantage Prairie Stream has over it in that way is that it is a plains and an island, which means we can find it with our claim jumper since it's got the plains type. Deserted Beach doesn't, but it's much more likely to come in untapped for us. So very good fixing there. And then finally, we've got our utility lands, which are all the same as before, except for Restless Anchorage. Restless Anchorage is a tap land that taps for our colors, but it also is a creature land. We can pay 1, a white and a blue into it, and until end of turn, it becomes a 2/3 white and blue bird creature token, or creature rather, with flying. It's still a land, so we can do that, and if we really wanted to, we could still tap it for mana. And when it attacks, we make a map token. Map tokens are another type of predefined artifact that lets us choose a creature, pay 1, tap, and sacrifice the map token to have that creature explore. Explore, it's hard to sum up. It means to do this. You reveal the top card of your library, and if it's a land, you put it in your hand. Otherwise, you can leave it on top of your library or put it in your graveyard, but either one of those two options that you choose, the creature you chose to explore gets a +1/+1 counter. So you're either putting a land in your hand or getting a counter on your creature and getting a choice to sort of pseudo-surveil that land, or that card rather, the non-land card that was on top of your library. All of that is great because Explorer is powerful, but the fact that Restless Anchorage can attack and just make another artifact token means we have another artifact that we can use for our Waterbending if we want to. So I feel like the upgrades for this are still not super expensive. You could, if you wanted to, put in a Meticulous Archive to get a Surveil land in here, or run Hallowed Fountain if you wanted a shock land. You definitely still have ways that you can go up and upgrade this land base, but it's pretty solid on its own right now and doesn't cost that much. So that about sums it all up. I hope you enjoyed this video. This is the first time I've done a deck that is sort of a bracket 1 flavor only exhibition style deck. If you're interested in seeing more of these, it's pretty hard to do it for books 2 and 3, but I'm happy to give it a shot if there's interest. And in either case, this is the first time I've made a video that has 2 versions of the same deck in it as well, so let me know what you think of it in the comments. And again, I'm releasing new Avatar Commander decks every Thursday through mid-January when Lorwyn Eclipse drops. So let me know in the comments as well if you'd like to see a different Avatar Commander deck or a specific style you'd like me to build it in. So thanks for watching, everyone. I really appreciate you being here. Make sure to like and subscribe, and remember, as always, magic is fun. You should play more Magic.